I'm Paddy Bramwells. I was a street performer from 1985. I started, and I finally stopped in. I think it was 26 years later, 27 years. What is that? That's whatever that is.
Well, I was born in 84, so I'm 35 years old. So it'll be 34. Yeah.
Oh, you were born. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So yeah, it was. I can actually tell you the date because for some reason I always remembered the date on that we got our license at Covent Garden through Alternative Arts, which was June the 15th, 1985. That was exactly the day I started as a professional performer. Not the day I started earning a living.
If I look a bit distant, I'm just sharing stuff online about what's going on. So don't panic. I am listening to you. Please carry on, mate.
Yeah. So yeah, started then in a triple act, which then went down to double act. We worked together for about a couple of years. Then we went solo, and it was always going to be just a year. Yeah, I was only going to be a street performer for one summer, and then I was only going to be solo for a year. And any plan I ever had always went out the window. You see what I mean? And it just carried on and on and on. Yeah, every time I thought, oh, that's it, I've had enough, I'm going to retire, I'm going to stop, I carried on until eventually kind of life kind of went, no, stop. You've got to.
Did you always see it as a sort of a stepping stone? You were going to go, well, I'll do this until I do this?
It was literally me and my mate Johnny. We had done our A-levels together in Norfolk. That's where we met, in a technical college in Norfolk. And we both moved to London separately. Yeah. We both hung around Covent Garden, because you do if you haven't got a job, but that was a great place to go. And it looked really easy. It looked so easy. It really did. And we thought, well, let's do a summer at Covent Garden. We'll earn a whole load of money because we're seeing all these performers just literally going out, getting crowds, doing shows. What seemed to be to us making like an enormous amount of money, and we would finance a theatre company. That was our idea. And we learned very, very quickly that it is really, really not very easy at all. We earned absolutely nothing. First show we ever did, we made a loss because we broke stuff. We made no money, and we were so bad. Oh my God, we were so bad. And we loved it, absolutely loved it. And we were just hooked. We were absolutely hooked. We were hooked on a way of earning a living that wasn't a way of earning a living, that got us no respect whatsoever. We were dreadful at it. I mean, just awful. The show that we came up with originally was possibly one of the worst street shows ever thought up.
Tell us what it is now.
We did. So the three of us, there was myself, Johnny, and our friend Katie, who left us after a little while, very sensibly. We put together a kind of, how would you describe it? It was an audience participation show based on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. That is as much as I can remember about it, except that we had decided that the Seven Dwarfs were basically going to be members of the audience. So we started with a show with no experience whatsoever, and just the idea that, you just go out onto Covent Garden and get people to tell people to come out, tell people to do things, and they do it. So that's how it worked. We got 7 members of the audience out, and we couldn't control any of them, and we didn't know how to control any of them, and we weren't entertaining. We spent weeks rehearsing this in parks. Literally weeks, and I think we dumped it in about 4 days. That was how I remember it. It was something like 3 weeks work, 3 days performing it, and then we were like, we can never do that show again. It was so bad. It was brilliant, but it didn't seem to matter. Do you know what I mean? It really. And then we basically, Johnny comes in one day and goes, I talked to this bloke down a pub the other night, and he told me an idea we can nick. And I was like, okay, well, let's steal an idea then. And he told me about this concealed head idea. And that very night, I went home and watched a Fatty Arbuckle short, which had that very idea in it. And I was like, mate, this idea is probably older than film itself. so we're having it. It's not a problem. And then we literally based our entire show around one illusion, one trick, which was basically my head sticking out of a box with a blanket over it, and my partner getting a child to do violent things to my head. And that was it.
Yes.
That was the whole show. And it was brilliant. And it worked. And that, you know, from this big thing that we'd put together, which we thought, oh, yeah, this is going to be great, which was just shit. We came up with a really, really simple, violent slapstick show, which was great and people loved. Didn't make us any money. But it was really good fun. And we were part of that kind of, I suppose that kind of one of the last generation of non-circus based performers. So we came in without a skill, you know, we came in without any idea, because the people who were at Covent Garden before us were mainly also doing non-circus based shows. Whereas now, you know, most shows are based around a stunt skill of some sort, where the audience go, oh my God, look at what you're doing. We can't do that. In those days, it was people just entertaining. And so we were a product of that. Do you know what I mean? We were a product of our environment. You know, people talk about the old days when people were more creative. It's like, well, no, we didn't know any better. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
It's difficult to say you didn't know any better, because you had something then that you don't have now.
Yes. I mean, we had the advantage of not knowing what you were supposed to do to make a street show. Do you know what I mean?
But didn't you? You had your Chris Lynams to watch. You had
He was at that point. The people that really influenced me were Chris Apis, Andre Vincent, Ari Pavarotti, as he called himself in those days, Nick Nicholas, who became a mate, and we were flatmates for years, and a guy called Mike Mulkerran, who very few people will know about nowadays, who did a trick with a piece of bubble gum, an invisible snake, and somebody else's £5 note, and that was his entire show. And I would just watch him in just awe. And weirdly, when I finally ended up doing a solo show, my show involved somebody else's £5 note, which it wasn't a direct link, but when I thought about it, it was like, oh, look at that. But yeah, they were, and of course there was the Vicious Boys as well, who again, very few street performers nowadays will know about, they were our celebrities at the time, because they'd just gone on to television. So they were just finishing at Covent Garden when I started. And then they became TV presenters. So like Kids TV and that kind of thing. That was Andy Smart and Angelo. Oh, sorry, Angelo. I can't remember his second name. But Andy Smart, he's one of the comments.
You can, through guilt check later and then put in comments and apologise.
That's right. I haven't seen Angelo since 1986, so I think it's.
And if anyone does want to put in comments, any corrections, any ideas, please do comment. We won't respond to it straight away. It's about a 30-second delay, but it does help the video get seen by other people. So
do comment, especially help my memory along. But it was an interesting time in those days, because you had people like Nickelodeon, you had the Antibodies, you had a lot of you had more theatre-based performers. That's where they'd come from. These were people like myself who wanted to be actors, who had come to Covent Garden and were doing a theatrical performance of a sort. And then, of course, you had people like Mr. Adams and Mr. Dandridge, Chris and Alex, who were, of course, they were jugglers, and magicians. Duncan Trillo. There's a name that's gone out of my head, which is so annoying because he was absolutely brilliant. But again, you had shows in those days were about the show rather than the hat. Now, I know that right. Now, don't get me wrong, we all wanted to earn money and people talked about the money they earned,
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, you know, we're just doing it for love, man. We were doing it because we wanted to earn money. But the shows at that point hadn't yet become the formula. Now, the thing is, it was my generation that created that formula. So my generation came along and was doing sort of art and stuff. But then it was my generation that actually were the ones who went, yeah, this is how the structure of a show works. And so whereas I can claim that I was part of that artistic generation, as it were, I also have to hold my hand up and go, yeah, we were also the ones who ruined it.
Yes.
You know, we were also the ones who discovered the beginning, the middle and the end.
The £5 notes, the kid.
Yeah, all of that stuff. You know, we were the ones who kind of, Not,
and so what do you think then, as somebody, because I've talked to people who were sort of slightly before it, or I've talked to people who were just literally on the cusp of it, but as somebody who saw the change from it being these kind of shows which were people going, I've got a premise, let's go and try and make this premise work, to shows that are about doing shows, that they're specifically just meant to be functional pieces of craft.
It was a slow transition. Oh, Aileen's pup, Angelo Abelo. That was Abelo, was Angelo's surname. Hello, Aileen.
There you go.
You should talk to Aileen. Aileen,
yeah, definitely. Aileen, I'll PM you after the
definitely video. Talk to Aileen. But yeah, no, it was a slow process, and it was a very slow and natural process where everything that you did sort of work towards. It's like you know, basically you come up with all these ideas for street show, and on a cold Wednesday in February, you know the stuff that doesn't work, and you know the stuff that will work, and the stuff that will earn you your mortgage at the end of the day or whatever. And so it's all the stuff, all the lovely, happy stuff that works beautifully in a festival, leads your show bit by bit by bit by bit, and what you have left is the stuff that really works. And so that naturally creates that the perfect street show. That only becomes a problem, I find, when it's people are literally only going for, oh, you do that, you do that, you do that. And I used to find that quite depressing, and also quite depressing for myself as well, because I knew how much of my show was about what worked. Do you know what I mean? I knew, there's all this creativity in me. There's also a lot of hackery going on as well.
Well, isn't it interesting, the hypocrisy that we're all engaged in? And it does seem like, I mean, doing this video more than anything I've done looking at busking in the year, I've done it 15 years now. I saw you in probably 12 years ago, 14 years ago, something like that.
Near the end of when very close to me finishing,
which was a great experience, I have to say that. And in the entire time of that, just looking now, you can see in terms of creativity, people going through the same stuff then than they are now.
It most definitely is. It's a weird thing, and quite often you find yourself doing shows and trying to get that creative spirit back into your show, and you forget. I can remember I was thinking about this the other day when you'd asked me to do this, and I was thinking, okay, you know, what can I actually talk about? What would be interesting to anybody else? And I always remember a moment. Great Dave Evans came up to me after show in Covent Garden one day, and he went, "Mate, you should really try smiling during your show." And it was basically because of the winter, whenever it was, you know, you're there 5-6 days a week, and I was just doing my show. You know, these shows were hard. They were, you know, getting the audience, holding the audience, making the money out of it was not a joyful thing. It was I've gone to work thing. Yeah, you know, and I had forgotten to actually think about why I did my show. So basically, I could start my show and my brain would switch off. And so my facial expressions would go.
Yeah, and that does surprise me, because you do, when I watched you perform with quite a weight. I mean, half of the thing about when I watched you work on the street, at least that one time, was you're continuously and powerfully communicating to people non-stop.
That's what I would try and do. And obviously when Dave made this comment to me, it was at a time when I wasn't doing that. Do you know what I mean? I was obviously in a kind of like a.
You were looking for the minimum possible. Like,
Yeah.
how do I get from A to B to C with the least effort possible?
But yeah, I've always one of the things I always wanted to do with my show was communicate. Because I don't know if you remember my show, but it only had 2 tricks. It's quite famous for that. It did. There was very little in it. Really, there's such a small amount. I was once challenged to do my entire show in 5 minutes, and I did it in 6.
Yeah.
Show. And it's like, there's no material in my show at all.
That's not your show. A 6-minute show is not your show.
But that was the content, if you feel to me. And everything else was just the me performing, and that's the bit that I loved. Lee was talking with you yesterday, and you're talking about the beginning, the bit at the beginning of the show when you're getting an audience being the most interesting, and that was always the bit where I was at my most creative, always the bit where I was having the most fun and would produce a relationship with an audience, which was that core audience, which would then hopefully carry me and those people through the rest of the show. And that kind of came from when me and Johnny were doing the Cool Shades back in the 80s in Covent Garden in the middle of winter. And we didn't take a day off. We always worked at least 5 days a week. We didn't have any respect for people who just appeared on weekends. We were like, whatever. Anyone can earn a lot of money on a Saturday and Sunday in Covent Garden.
Wasn't there a phrase? There's a phrase I use and I quote to you quite regularly, which is Paddy Bramwells said, "If you can see 3 people in the corridors of Covent Garden, then you can work it."
Yes,
workable.
Thank you very much. That came from that. I mean, basically, we knew if we could get 10 people stood in front of us. No, 5 people stood in front of us. We could build an audience from it. Now there were 2 of us, and we did not stop. Do you know what I mean? And as a kind of, it's quite nice. When we got to our peak, we were told, and we hadn't realised this at all, that in Edinburgh, everybody, because our audiences were so noisy and we were so noisy, and that had just literally come from the desperately getting and holding an audience in the middle of winter in Covent Garden. And it had become that, that thing of constant energy, constant, you never letting up with the audience, never stopping. Because again, we had, our show was literally a small child standing on a box, hitting me, driving at a spike into the top of my head. That was it. It was really cartoonish and really, it was very kind of, there was no skills involved. There was no moment where the audience went, "Oh my God, that's amazing." The only thing they would do is go, "Oh, how is his head not damaged?" And it was literally, everybody, it was a cabbage on a stick. I've given away the magic. With Fatty
Was
Arbor.
there an anti-skill? Sorry, was there an anti-skill kind? Oh, spilling wine over myself here. Was there an anti-skill kind of sentiment amongst the performers there? There does seem to be something I feel off of the people.
I don't think there was an anti-skill sentiment. No, I think it's just that very few of us have skills, and so we loved. I mean, Chris and Alex were at that time, Mr. Adams with Standridge show. It wasn't a case of, "Oh God, look at them juggling." It was, "Oh my God, look at what they can do," and look how they do it, and look at the gags they've got in their show, and look at, the timing they had together. We would, there was basically maybe 3 shows at Covent Garden that everybody else would sit and watch. And that would be Keno when he was being really, really kind of over the top. Just love to see what he would do next. It would be Chris and Alex. Later on, it would be Pepe when he was in his prime before the.
Well, he's the guy. I've got this thing more than anything, of this thing of the competition and the kind of the resentment towards skill shows was from Pepe. He talks about it a lot. But
bless him. Pepe, he lovely bloke,
yeah,
but bitter alcoholic, and and he used to sit in Covent Garden every morning at the draw, and every day he would shout, "So much talent in the world, so little of it here." And you're like, mate, I'm sorry, I love you, but you're being a twat again, you know.
But do you think that was, we talked earlier about characters, about performers having characters and needing those characters?
Oh,
was
definitely.
that what he needed? It was part of his work, part of the whole package of him.
Very possibly.
Him being this belligerent arsehole.
It was really weird because he was never a belligerent arsehole to me. We got on really, really well. He would definitely pick people that he would try and wind up, and he would try and be horrible to, especially new performers. I
heard other people say there's a bit of a bullying culture there at the time.
Now, I disagree with that because I was a new performer there in 1985, and there was already very much a coterie of performers there that everybody knew each other. They were close. Do you know what I mean? And what I realised very quickly, and especially in the first 2 years I was there, is that every summer loads of new performers would arrive, right? Tons. In those days, it was like we were like a plague of locusts landing on the place. So
you're looking at 20, 30 acts, something like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Loads.
Oh, wow. So when people complain nowadays about it, it was exactly the same back then.
Yeah, no. It was more then. Because there were so many new people that would arrive every summer. And what would happen is that nobody would talk to you during the summer because you were expected to just fade away or leave or not be there, or do you know what I mean? Be a bit of a hanger on at that time. And it wasn't until you kind of went through a winter, everybody kind of went, "Oh yeah, you're actually a performer." So I wouldn't say it was a bullying culture, but it was definitely a culture of, well, I'm not going to waste time making friends with you if I don't actually think you're going to be around, or I just think you are try hard. Somebody's just come along to go, "Oh yeah, I can do this," you know, because obviously everybody had to bring ego with them. Do you know what I mean? And quite often you would get people who would think, "Oh, everybody's ignoring me, so I'm going to push it," and everyone would just go, "Oh, fuck off." You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you know, just chill out a little bit, you know, back off. We definitely did have some. I'm trying to remember his name. There was a saxophone player called Johnny Hooper, and there was also a magician whose name Leo Ward, and those two could be really, really mean, like properly mean to you. But I realised quite quickly that once you kind of went, "Oh well, actually, you're going to have a go. I'm just going to have a go back," and they would click. So like me and Johnny, we were known as the middle class boys, you know, because we had A levels. You know?
Yes.
And I just remember sort of Johnny Hooper, who had this lovely Welsh accent. He'd go, "You middle class boys," like this. And so I started going, "Look, mate, I'm sorry, I'm far too middle class to actually talk to you. I'm not middle class. I'm upper middle class." And
there was this to and fro.
Yeah, and you're just a working class oik, and I don't think you should speak to me unless you ask permission. So can you just fuck off? And he'd go, "Oh, I love that." You know? And so it was. There was a very much a boys' own club kind of atmosphere there.
Yeah.
But I think that was kind of, well, we know who we are and we don't know who you are yet. But
do you think it was part of the creative melting pot?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, you had to prove yourself. And is
this potentially an element of what kept the hack out at that period?
Possibly, but it's also possibly what helped create the hack, because there were some people who were very, very obsessed with how much money was in your hat or was in their hat, and they would always tell you, "How was your show?" "Oh, it was this much money." And you go, "That's not what I asked. You know, I didn't ask how much money did you make. I literally asked, how was your show? I don't care how much money you made, you know, because I don't live in your house." And there was a definite thing of, for some people, they rated everything they did on what they got in their hat, and then there was a benchmark that if you didn't make that kind of money, you weren't worth them talking to you. And there are a couple of people who, you know, I became very great mates with, who had that. And it was kind of like, oh, you know, I love you, but we never get past your hat when we're talking about your show. You know, we never get, you'd say to somebody, you know, someone go, how was your show? And you go, oh, there was this bit when and this happened, that was lovely. Or I'm really, you know, I missed a complete bit of timing there and that was a bit shit. And you go to them, how was yours? And they go, oh, mate, 35 quid. You're like, but you'll know, you're not going to tell me a story. You're not going to tell me about the kid. You know, you're not going to tell me about that funny bit with the heckler. It's just the hat. Or the fact that your hat was damaged.
Have you never had that moment where you've had a show where it's been rocking and the hat's not been good enough and people ask you how was the show? It's an amazing show, only this.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Where you think, oh, I am a comedy god. And these are all my comedy disciples. And they think I am a deity. And then you stand there at the end and you want to punch them all because they've put nothing in your hat. I had an entire day in the Linz Festival in Austria like that, where I did the most shows I'd ever done in a day because every hat made me angry. And
I'm going to crack it. I'm going to crack this. What I was missing something. I can see what I was missing that time. I'm going to get it right.
And it literally was, well, it wasn't even that. It was me blaming the audience for not getting how brilliant I was. They had loved my show and paid me nothing. And I was literally, even though I wasn't meant to, I would start another show straight away. I did 7 shows that day. Now, my voice could never cope with 7 shows. 4 was my maximum. Yeah. No, microphone.
Wow.
And and the problem was, it's the very next day I had to fly home to England to do a pilot reading for a TV series.
Which must have went amazing. Was it a leathery-faced, dark, shadowy creature in an alleyway?
It was me with a table full of quite well-known actors, and me at the end, nobody knew from Adam, just going, anyway, literally with just squeaking. Yeah, funnily enough, the show never got made. You know, so yeah.
Well, nothing lost then.
No. Funny enough, no. It was called Space Bastards, so its title didn't really help very much.
Yeah, I mean, it's a niche crowd, definitely. You know, I mean, that was the beginning concept. I'm sure they would have finessed it up into, you know.
Yes, hopefully, yeah.
The people of space with no parents or whatever.
Well, it was. What was it based on?
Star Orphan.
No, it was customs officers in space.
Okay, that was interesting.
That was
so the 80s was definitely a different time for movie making, television.
Yeah.
So, Covent Garden in that time, was there a supportive, creative environment there in terms of people writing with other people? I'm interested in talk a lot with people about the creative process, particularly for younger people who are beginning busking now. Yeah, I talk a lot. Please carry on.
There definitely was. I mean, my show, you would, if you had new stuff, you would always show it to other performers and go, "What do you think of this?" You know, what you know, people would always help out.
Would you show it like 1-to-1, or would you show it, say, "Come and watch my show"?
No, you would literally go, "Oh, I've come up with a new idea. Let's do this." I remember being at Steve Rawlings' house, and we all absolutely hammered the very first time he set fire to his hat, and I put the lighter fluid on his hat, and we were in his bedroom with him basically with his hat on fire, you know, and that's like a bit of history right there. You kind of go, oh my God. When I very first did my solo show, basically I'd done sort of 2 years of a double act with Johnny, and we had a show which had an enormous great box made out of plywood, which you had to carry, and a huge trunk which had to be pulled on a trolley. And I didn't want to do it anymore. It was too much stuff. I wanted to see if I could work solo as an experiment. I was only going to do it for 1 year. And so basically I needed a show, but I had no skills. And so my show was invented by Nick Nicholas, John Feely, Alex Dandridge, me, a little bit of input from me. And they were it was Nick showed me a magic trick. John Feely showed me how to do the magic trick well. Alex Dandridge built one of the props, which I still have to this day. And then basically the script of it was developed by me. But that was literally, right, okay, I need a show, guys. What can you do? And me and Nick were flatmates at the time, and he basically showed me the beginnings of a magic trick. And I was like, I didn't want to do that version of it because it was quite a common, you've probably seen it, basically, £5 note comes out of an orange, or
definitely most of the people watching will understand the thing you're talking about.
So that was being done, so I didn't want to do that. So we came up with the idea of it coming out of a Zippo lighter. We went out and bought a Zippo lighter, discovered that you couldn't do it the way that we thought we could do it, so we had to come up with a different way of doing it.
Do you think you'd be able to open it and slip the £5 in?
Yeah, we literally thought you could get the note in between the middle and the which you can't because they're too well made.
Filled with petrol, they don't want it to come out.
So basically, my show was a collaborative effort, and that was the same with a lot of people's. When people had new things, you would show each other, or you would talk about shows together. Also, a lot in those days when people got bored, it was really common to team up with somebody else for a week, just to go, do you want to do a double act? And they would generally be awful.
Do you think this was down to the queue, down to the...
No.
Do you think, because we don't see that as much, you do see some, and I'm trying to think of what the difference is in Covent Garden then to now. So now we have a storage and people tend to go on the pitch, do their shows there now. An idea that other people have postulated is, potentially, one of the many ideas, is that people aren't queuing up at the back of the pitch anymore. So you're not sharing the time and space with other people to workshop and chat, because you do so much learning on the back of the pitch.
You definitely do. I mean, that was the whole social scene was in two places, which was the back of the pitch and then whatever pub we hadn't been banned from that month afterwards. And we tended to get banned from quite a lot of pubs. Usually because of Nick, bless him, or Keno.
I heard stories of there was a pub called the Serpent. I think it was a Serpent. He used to go in there some nights after good days, and the entire bar was closed, and the street performers would buy out the bar basically.
I don't know about the Serpent. No. There was oh my god, there were so many that we went into. I mean, we did take over pubs at times, but not necessarily. Well, we thought we were being funny. Yeah. we were probably the loud wankers at the bar, the loud wankers on the tables,
but you were seen, I assume, as quite a centre point, an anchor of the community in those days, and we think we still are to an extent there today now.
Yeah, I mean, there was the scene at Covent Garden was very lively. So the social scene was very lively. I mean, I've gone through. I don't go through Covent Garden very much because it tends to make me depressed when I do, and I don't know if that's just because I don't understand the scene that's there anymore, or it just doesn't seem to be the same as when I was there in its heyday. Not its heyday, sorry, in my heyday, not Covent Garden's heyday.
Well, I could argue that there's something of truth in that comment. Not entirely, but there's something of truth there.
But there was
after.
Yeah, there was definitely a very lively social scene. All my sort of best and oldest mates are from those days. We experienced a lot together, and there was that thing of you just spent the whole day underneath the portico, behind the pitch. And that was where you spent your whole day. You literally got there in the morning, you queued up to do, you would get there early in the morning to do the list. That was in the days before names out of the hat.
Which has been turned into numbers in a computer now.
Oh, is it?
It's all done by random number generator on the phone now. Well, I argued for long. Well, I argued long and hard that the draw was better. It's theatrical.
Oh,
it's a bit of fun in the morning,
Well, can I just say that I got to claim a little bit of credit for that, because when I argued for the system to change when it became, if you owned a van, you got a show. And
is this the 12 o'clock at night thing?
Yeah, and it became
Can you explain it a bit better? Because a lot of people won't know what that is.
So basically, the way it worked from the day I got to Covent Garden until we changed it was that the list started at midnight.
So it's 1985, right?
Yes, this is 1985, and however long this system had already been in place, I'm not sure. Yeah. But there was a piece of paper literally on a board or up on the pillar, and you wrote your name on that list, and then you did not leave. So if you got there at midnight, you spent the night there. Okay. If you got there at 6 a.m, you were there from 6 a.m. Now, basically, you couldn't leave Covent Garden. You could go to a cafe in Covent Garden. You could sit in your car. You could sit in a van, etc., etc., etc. And I used to get shows because I would drive in for whatever time I knew the earliest person who drove in rather than stayed in would get there after the van thing. But it came
at 6 or 7 in the morning.
Yeah, 6 in the morning you'd be there pretty much. Yeah. And then you just sleep in the car or whatever. But then it came to the point where people who own vans would have their mates in their vans with them. So you'd have 9 people in a van, and so if you didn't own a van, you didn't get a show.
And if you owned a van as well, you were like the king because everyone wanted to stay in the people's vans.
Exactly. Yeah? Okay. I kind of thought, well, this goes against the whole ethos of being street performers. This goes against the whole ethos of us being these kind of, oh, look at us, we're rebels we're not sharing it.
We've claimed it.
Yeah, and it's basically, it's now the people who have are going to get everything, and the people who don't have are not, which is a little bit like the system that we're trying to fight against. And so over many meetings and much persuasion by myself and by others, it wasn't just by me, but I was a full-on, right, I'm not having this. And the thing is, for me, it worked for me because I still got a show, because I had a car and I could drive, and I was prepared to drive in really friggin' early if I had to. And at one point I had a van as well. But it was like, no, this is just not fair. If you're relying on public transport, you're not going to get it. And then also you would find out that people had come in and signed in the midnight and gone home.
And so could people just sleep and live around? What was the area? Set the scene at this time. So if people are living in the vans, I can't imagine people being able to sleep in the vans in Covent Garden. Right?
You slept down Henrietta Street or King Street, down the side. And
no one would hassle you? You would have burners in their van?
Yeah, you'd have drunk people knocking on your doors. It would be noisy.
What are the kind of shops in that area? What was the kind of the commerce in the rented places?
See, in those days, it was a lot of you had publishers, you had sandwich shops, there was a couple of kind of sandwich places. It was mainly cafes. There weren't as many bars. I mean, Covent Garden now, I go through Covent Garden and it just seems to be wall-to-wall bars now. Not as many at all. It was still pretty much the old pubs. But it still had a very vibrant nighttime culture. So you had the Punch and Judy pub, you had all the other pubs around. So it was still full like it is now.
And so people are going there to drink in the evening. Are they people who are working the area, people who live in the area, tourists?
Tourists, a lot. Not so much people who worked in the area, I don't think, but a lot of tourists, a lot of English tourists. It was very much known as, you go to Covent Garden to go and hang out. And also in those days as well, street shows supposedly they went only till dusk. They tended to go on a little bit later, but you'd have big shows in the evening going on. It was a very trendy place to be. It was really weird in 85 when I started. It wasn't a fashionable retail area at all. Not at all. Not like it is now. And it was Paul Smith opening his shop in, not Seven Dials, around that kind of area that brought in all the kind of the big money fashion shops. They did not exist there at all. It was, sort of like there were a couple of music venues and very little else. It was basically. So
would it be the Intrepid Fox? Would that be one of the venues there? At
that time? What was it called? It was Rock. Oh God, not Hard Rock Cafe. It wasn't Hard Rock Cafe. It was. There was basically a basement venue below where there's a big Apple Mac store now, isn't there, underneath the colonnades?
Yeah. Used to be was there a Curiosities place there?
Yeah, the Curiosities place was downstairs in Covent Garden. That was beautiful, lovely.
And was that around during your era?
Yeah. I mean,
so am I right in thinking there was a lot of stuff in the area that was to facilitate people being tourists there? You know, kind of museums, curiosities, that kind of thing.
So all of the shops in Covent Garden, pretty much all of those were independent little shops. There weren't any chains at all, really. There certainly weren't really expensive cafes. You know, they got expensive, but it was in those days. It was still an area that was quite experimental, because remember, it was going to get knocked down. That whole area was going to be demolished and turned into a road. Not many people know that. Oh yeah.
Really, they were going to have a ring road around Covent Garden.
It was Covent Garden, which is one of the most historic areas in London. It goes back 600 years. The market, is 600 years old. It was just going to get turned into a dual carriageway. I mean, genuinely a dual carriageway with a flyover. Wow. Yeah, the whole thing was going to get knocked down, and it was the Covent Garden Residents Association, I think, I might be wrong, that helped say that Rock Garden. Anthony Campbell has just put up. It was the Rock Garden. Of course, it was the Rock Garden. It was in Covent Garden. But yeah, so it was an area that had kind of changed from being basically a vegetable market. And if you got into a cab in those days and asked for Covent Garden, they would still ask which one you meant. They go, the market or the wine bar, they would say.
So the market would be where you were going, and the wine bar is somewhere separate?
No, the wine bar is Covent Garden, where the performance happen. But Covent Garden Market moved out to Vauxhall.
Yes, I mistook it in another interview with Paddy. Let's leave it behind. I can't remember it now. Not a compelling point for you to, but yes, there was a thing where the vegetable market moved out, and was it derelict for a time?
Yeah. So basically, the Covent Garden itself, and that's when the street performers were moved in there. Alternative Arts was moved in to try and help liven the area up. And so Alternative Arts, who used to run the West Piazza, not the inside pitch, that was done by the Covent Garden management. They put on.
Who were the Covent Garden management at that time?
It was owned still by the council.
Okay.
And then it got bought out by a big insurance company.
Was it Scottish Widows?
Yeah, no, I think it's before Scottish Widows, actually.
Okay.
And that's when we formed the Street Performers Association to try and protect ourselves.
Do you know what year that was in, just out of interest?
That would probably be 88, 89, somewhere around there.
It's just interesting because we're doing Street Performers Associations for the whole of Westminster now. As they're bringing in licensing, our response is to try and make Street Performers Associations say, don't use this.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's myself, Rob Ballard, Eddie Izzard, a couple of other people. We started the Street Performers Association to protect ourselves from when they sold it to this company. The idea was to have paid street performers who would basically be stilt walkers. You'd be colour. We said, no, we can't have that. We're not, we got equity involved and we got all sorts of people involved. It was great, and sort of threatened to all move out, and they caved in quite quickly. But from it, we got the Street Performers Association, which is pretty cool. That was.
And it's something which lives on to this day.
Yeah, hooray!
It's one of the interesting things, big time. One of the interesting things, and we've had this recently with the SPA, with Westminster trying to bring in licensing. That SPA that you guys set up then is now debating and talking, and is probably one of the pivotal functional organisations in the future of performance in public spaces in London.
That's great. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, let's see how it'll go, but it's interesting. Are you against the idea of licensing? Just, I very rarely brought this up in an interview, but just now it comes to mind.
Well, I have a yes and no, in that I helped create Street Performers. Our our list of rules for ourselves. Your
code of practice.
Yeah, code of practice. And I helped create the license in Covent Garden. And then I worked without a license in Covent Garden for most of my career, because I used Naked Flame, and Naked Flame was legal there. And so I never worked the inside pitch as soon as they banned Naked Flame. And they didn't notice for about 15 years that I didn't actually have a license. And Yeah, I don't. What I don't like about licensing is I don't like how it's never run by an arts organisation. It's run by a council organisation, and a council organisation is very good at doing what a council organisation needs to do, but it's not an arts body. And an arts body will go, well, we have a license here, so we can produce art, and we can curate art, and we can basically put something in place for people to go, this is a brilliant place to be. A council is there to make sure everybody follows the rules, whatever those rules are, and whether those rules are actually relevant or not. I remember being moved on the South Bank near the Wheel by a security guard there because they'd brought in licensing there, and I didn't have a license.
Do you remember what year that was?
I don't know. It was, I hadn't worked by the Wheel for quite a while because it had turned into hot chestnut and shitty stalls land, and I'd moved further up past the National at that point.
But we're working at the National now. We've worked away. A lot of us have moved away from the license place and just worked the National again.
Brilliant.
I'm just quite interested to hear how it changed. So the stretch to the South Bank, the 100-metre stretch, which is work now, was stalls and unworkable and bullshit at some time. Is this what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So basically, when the bit I'm talking about is by the Wheel, but just along from the Millennium Wheel, where the big
which is a licensed place now. This is
okay.
Sort of
So that's right. Moved on. And I had one of those wanky street performer arguments with the security guard when I was going, mate, we literally went around the whole world from this river here, and the whole world came into Britain down this river here. And I haven't got a license. And, he was being a security guard and I was being a tit. And between the two of us, we had a little standoff for a little while. But yeah, when the Wheel first went up, that area there for a short amount of time, and I don't know how long that amount of time was like a secret festival in London.
I learned there.
Beautiful. Yes, I know.
Yeah. I saw you there working there as I was reaching the beginning, very literally I was a tumour on the side of the circle shows doing as a lot of people are in the beginning, just like working between the builds and making people feel uncomfortable when they went out to build, because I did a 10-minute show and it's not hard to pump a small crowd for 10 minutes. And then I went onto that pitch, and then when I went onto that pitch I saw people like yourself. It was a really formative experience, going from doing 6 hours of performing to going to do one show a day. And then watching people like yourself who were powerful, had words for everything, every moment. Which is something which you learn over time. I've realised the experience is the hours spent. And it was a great thing to have. It really was a great experience to have people like yourself doing that. And what do you think? Is it years of experience? It's just time spent to get there?
Yeah, it's time spent to get there. It really is. I've got a great example of how this works. A few years ago, Bill Ferguson dragged me out of retirement by basically emailed me and said, do you want to do my...
Do you want to give just a brief description of who Bill is?
Right. For those of you who don't know, Bill Ferguson is a street performer. He's a lovely bloke for a start, but he has the kind of charisma that we all dream of having and would love to have. He can... he basically can build a show from nothing, without costume, literally in his trousers and shirt and a few props. And his show was, in terms of content, the least interesting show possible. He did a juggling challenge, right? So there was nothing in that for me, right, as interesting at all. And I would watch his show as much as I could. Absolutely brilliant. His charm, his communication ability with the audience, his just invisible ability to make an audience stop and just want to watch everything he did was amazing, absolutely amazing. And he's retired now, but he comes out of retirement occasionally. But yeah, he dragged me out of retirement a few years ago to do his festival in Ashbourne. And me and Matt Ricardo, who's another one you should talk to, Matt Ricardo, we drove up there in my car, and it was a 3-hour journey. And for that entire 3 hours, we tried to remember my show because I hadn't done it for 6-7 years. And I did 4 shows that weekend, And on the last show, I got the last line in place. And what I discovered, which I hadn't realized, was that over the year, my show had become a thing where there was not a single line that was not necessary, that didn't relate to something that had gone before and didn't then relate to something that would then come after, and that worked beautifully. And it was like, and this literally developed over the years. It was this beautiful piece of joinery, do you know what I mean, that was stuck together so perfectly. And the problem is, of course, it was the same every single freaking time.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like a prison, you know, as you're explaining it sounds wonderful in the moment you realise it, but as soon as you've realised it after that,
Well, see, that was the thing. You see, in a festival, it wasn't a prison because I could go out of it and I could play and I could have fun and I could really enjoy myself. In a day-to-day situation where, I was talking like when Dave Evans said, you forgot to smile. It was then the prison because I could turn it on and it could go blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And at the end, it would finish, and I wouldn't have had to think about a single thing that I said because it had become so perfectly constructed. Now, that's not to say that I sat down and wrote a perfectly constructed street show. What that was is over the years, everything that worked stayed and everything that wasn't necessary fell away or was forgotten, or just left.
But also, I assume you're doing walk by and you're doing playful following. Even though you say it's all the same, it's not the same. You're not talking about two identical shows. You're not talking about one show and then you do another show and it's verbatim the same. You've got a database, I assume, is what you're talking about. But it's quite a set database.
It is. For the mechanics of the way that the trick worked, there were lines that, as I discovered when I'd forgotten the show, where bits of the show didn't work. If I hadn't said the line that was like 4 lines back or 5 or 10 minutes ago, if I hadn't done that, then the bit I'm doing now is meaningless. Because the weird thing about my show, because it was a magic show, but I'm not a magician. So I had done.
It's a finish, no? It's just a pinnacle point to release.
Yeah, I mean, literally,
I did this.
Yeah, and the thing is, I would say to the audience, I'm going to do this, and I'd actually already done it. The finale of my magic show was them showing the trick I'd done 25 minutes before, but they didn't know I'd done it yet. Do you know what I mean?
Do you feel bad for crowds? And it's not the same thing. I've asked everyone a similar question. I think that, for example, Freak Show and Magic have a different thing. With majority of Freak Show, not your Swan and Swords, but majority of it, it's stuff that is quite easy, but looks really hard.
Yeah.
Whereas with Magic, you're doing a similar thing. You're doing something that looks very difficult. It looks incredible, but there's a secret going on, When you're chatting, you've got your hands in your pockets. Something happens a long time before.
Yes,
I'm not going to be as brash as I have been with a lot of Freak Show routines and to explain things completely clearly. But with Freak Show, it's bullshit. Yeah, and with Magic, it's slightly not. But do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's with what I was always curious about after I kind of had time to sit back and actually look at my show. I would always think, if someone said, if I'd say like done a lovely show, and I know the audience have really enjoyed it, and people have come up and gone, oh my God, that was brilliant, that was lovely, and they go home and they tell their friends about it, what would they have said I'd done? And then I'd always feel slightly sorry for them, because they'd go, oh yeah, we saw this amazing show today, oh, it's such good fun, what did he do? Well, he talked a lot.
They're not going to say that, mate. They're going to say he made £5 appear somewhere.
Yeah, but
that's the weird fucking dichotomy you'll find yourself in, I assume.
Yeah, but then when his mates go, what else did he do? They'll go, well, that's all he did for 40 minutes, and we waited 40 minutes for that to happen. But the weird thing about that is, I had a show fail in Edinburgh once, and I didn't know I'd failed to do the trick until the finale. And I don't know if you remember my finale. It was basically, I'd get the guy to open the lighter, take out the middle bit, take out the note, and then fit his bit to it, right? And that was it. There's 2 little bits of paper coming together. And basically, without giving away the magic,
I'm sure there's a whole load of different stuff you do during
there was
it, you know, to make it
the
happen.
trick didn't happen, but I thought I'd rescued it. It had gone wrong in my suit, and I thought I'd rescued it.
Yeah.
And I got to the end of the show, and it had been a lovely show as well. It had been a proper festival, you know. Oh yeah, I make a lot of money. Oh yeah, this is good. My ego is soaring, you know. My heart is pumping. All is good in the world. And he opened the lighter, took out the middle bit, and I saw immediately that his note wasn't in there. And my bubble burst, you know. And I remember I fell to my knees, and in disappointment. And it was like that last hour, which I've just done, has now gone. And I just went,
fucked it.
Pick up my coat, put your hand in that pocket, take out what you find. And I was literally talking like this. And he took it out and folded it. And the audience went mad, as if I'd still done the trick. And I still did a really big festival hat. And I was like, so I've spent the last 20 minutes telling you something is going to happen. It hasn't happened. It's failed. His money still appeared, but not from the amazing place they said it was going to appear from. It's just literally in my pocket where you'd expect it to be. And you've still all gone, yay, that's brilliant.
Let me ask you this then. Do you think the finale is important when you take into mind the thing I believe you're describing, which is an audience's will and desire to engage in the fiction that's going on?
It's full. It depends on how you sell it, I think. And I think in that moment, me and them had enjoyed each other's company so much, and they could actually see that I was genuinely destroyed by the failure of this. And they still were like, yeah, but it's still brilliant. We still don't know how it's, you know, the fiver still exists. So we'll pay for it. I think if that had been in Covent Garden, not in a festival situation, on a cold Wednesday, they'd have gone, now you failed, didn't you? Yeah, that's a bit embarrassing. That's a bit uncomfortable.
But this is the thing I want to get at with this, is I think the reason that they were willing to do that is that when you get a large group of people and the show's going good, they're willing to suspend their disbelief far more.
Yeah, definitely.
And so they were willing to jump straight over the fact that you fucked up the trick. They jumped over it. They were like, oh, of course it's a great trick, because they wanted that. That's what collectively was the desire.
That is when that happens, it's joyous. We had now somebody help me out with this on the notes. Young performer on the outside circus stage at Glastonbury a couple of years ago, who did his whole show was basically based around getting up in the morning and making breakfast, with circus involved in it. And he had developed this thing with a toaster, where basically he did a knife throwing and caught the toast as it flew out the toaster and pinned it to a board. And we had watched him practice that backstage for 2 hours beforehand, trying to get the timing right, because he had a little clicker in his pocket which set the toaster off.
And so he's on this for 2 hours. For 2 hours.
For 2 hours. He goes on to do his show, and the audience absolutely loved him. But at the side, loving him even more, were all the backstage crew. Willingness to happen. Absolutely. And the first time he did it, it failed. And it was like, and he did it again and it failed. Then he got it the third time, I think it was. Third time. And the backstage crew were just going ballistic. They were just
I take it he fucked up a lot in this hour that he's practicing.
Yeah, because it was so difficult to do. It was so difficult to do. You know, he had to rely on the Bluetooth signal working perfectly with his timing. And then his timing being perfect with the Bluetooth timing. Which, yes, we all know, you start relying on technology and you're screwed, really.
100%. I mean, watch some of these videos. You'll see 1,000 different technological issues at play at different times around the globe.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing I always love the most in performing is it's that relationship between the audience and the performer, where it's not about the performer performing at an audience. And I always hated that. I always found myself getting very cynical watching performers going, and I'm doing this now, and I'm going to do this now, and I'm going to do this now, and you're going to watch. The
contract at its simplest thing.
And but it's when you get that fantastic relationship going on with the audience, and when you get in a situation like a festival, and I always go back to festivals because audiences are so much more relaxed there. They're so much more, right, let's see what happens, is that things can happen there between you and an audience that can't happen in your workaday life, in your workaday performing life. I had a thing in Glastonbury one year where I had the longest round of applause I've ever heard for anybody. Now, this is not me showing off. And it wasn't the audience applauding for me. It was the audience going, now we're going to fuck you up. And basically what it was, I was comparing the cabaret tent, big tent. And they used to get me in there to do the early morning bits when it was quiet, because I'd use street performing techniques. And so I'd explain clapping and cheering to them. And I'd explain how back in 1986, myself and my double act partner, invented an add-on to the clapping and cheering for tents, which was basically, we were put inside a tented venue which was empty and no one could see the stage and we couldn't get an audience. So he got the audience to line up, and we had maybe 30 people shoulder to shoulder on the outside of the tent as if the tent was full, and then do the clapping and cheering and not move until the people came up. It worked beautifully, absolutely beautifully. So,
and it's only something a street performer would think to do.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's about moving people around. It's about crowd control, which is something you don't do on stage.
Yeah, and it was one of those genius, obvious moments. And it was brilliant. So Johnny, my double act partner, came up with this. And I'd explained this to this audience 30 years later in the cabaret tent. I'm going, we're going to do the very same thing. So I need people to go and stand in the entrances, block them off completely. And then we're going to do this clapping and cheering. And it wasn't the first time I'd done it in the cabaret tent. And on this particular day, whatever was going on with the audience and me was working really, really well. So I do this, I do the bow, they go absolutely mad, and they just do it beautifully. It's lovely. It's just a whole celebration of, we're in Glastonbury, we love being in Glastonbury. Isn't this brilliant? Isn't this great fun? We're really enjoying this idea. We're watching people come. It's working really, really well. We're packing the tent. And it got to that point, that natural point of, it's now going to drop off. And just at the drop off point, it went up again. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is really cool. This is really cool. So I'm kind of riding it, going, yeah, this is really cool. And it gets to the point where it's going to drop off again. And at this point, I'm going, right, now we're going to settle it down, because I've got to get the next act on. Otherwise, I'm going to fuck up the schedule. And the audience see me going, right, brilliant, thank you very much, calm it down. And they're like, nah, fuck you. And they go up again. So it's now in its third cycle of, no, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it, but obviously at the same time, I'm going, no, don't. And they're looking at me going, no, he doesn't want us to do this. So now it's us.
It's become mischievous.
Yeah, it's all about us. And they did it 4 times. And it was 4 times where it got to the point where it cannot go on anymore, and it went on again, and it just went on, and it was brilliant. It's one of those lovely things that you come off and you go, that was the biggest round of applause I've ever seen, and it wasn't for me, even though I was on the stage. I started it, but that was created by the audience because of the environment that we're in, and
it's a synergy.
Yeah,
and it's just a decision being made collectively.
Yeah, and it's collectively by them, not by me.
But that's what I mean, collectively. Yeah, but you don't. I assume you weren't telling them "fuck you."
No. Oh no, I was.
You were going with it and enjoying it. I assume it was an enjoyable experience.
It was joyous. It was absolutely.
I'm sure they knew you were enjoying it. No one wants to enforce something nasty. No one wants to be a bully.
They were loving it.
They could see you playing.
Yeah, and they could see that I needed them to stop. Even though I was enjoying it, I did need them to stop, and they were just like, "No, we're just gonna go."
But do you think they could also see as well? You needed them to stop, but you were quite enjoying them doing it.
Oh God, yeah. Oh yeah, there's nothing quite as visible as a performer's ego on stage. Let's be honest.
Yeah, and people like to feed that. There's a thing I always think where egotists look great on camera. People who love themselves, best thing ever on camera.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
Have you seen the Tiger King?
I've only seen the first episode.
Okay, let's not spoil it, but yeah, it's the same kind of thing. I think idiots who really love themselves, captivating, most captivating people to watch on the screen ever.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
So as young performers, beginning writing shows, this is one of the things I'm really thinking about, because I often think, how do you talk to people writing shows to advise them to the best thing ever? And you don't have the environment you had in Covent Garden back in the day, where it was this kind of competitive, shoulder-rubbing, artistic environment. How do you advise people to write interesting work, to write creative, good quality work?
I think it's got to be, it has to be, you've got to take your maddest idea and just run with it. And the great thing about being young is that you don't know that your maddest idea won't work. It's like we didn't do our
nihilistic.
Pardon?
Nihilistic.
Well, it's that thing of, we didn't know our slapstick show was only a slapstick show. We just went, oh, that's our show. I didn't think that the finale of my show was 2 bits of paper coming together, and that's a little bit too small for a finale, because it was like, well, that's the trick I'm going to do. That's the trick that Nicholas has helped me make.
It's the response of the person.
Yeah, and it's literally just about the idea of performing. I can't remember, there was a performer a few years ago, again on the outside circus stage at Covent Garden, who did a show with a juggling ball and plastic drain pipes attached to different parts of his body. And I've never seen it since, but I still remember it as one of the most joyous moments ever, because it was completely balmy. It was just ridiculous. It would make you no money as a street show, but the people in the audience who would love it more than they'd love anything else. And that would be the thing that they would go away and they would talk about.
So where do you tell young people, when young people are starting and they need to make the money, people need to live?
Yeah.
You know, and where the busking takes time to get good at, it looks like it doesn't, and it is easy to hold a crowd for some time, but to make that into a reasonable living, a reliable living, takes work to do. So how do you ask people to be creative? And you want to ask some people, as someone who is now rapidly becoming an elder statesman of the craft, which is horrifying, you know, as I'm sure you can empathise.
It comes quickly.
Yeah. How do you advise people on this dichotomy of making a living but being creative?
I think, I don't know. I mean, the thing is about being young is you can afford to be skinned. So we celebrated going out making £18 between 3 of us, right? Can I just say?
You were squatting? I assume you were squatting at this point.
Yeah, I was squatting, yeah. But it was just, I don't know, it wasn't about, at that point, it wasn't about the money. It was about getting good at doing our show. Now, again, I don't want that to sound like, oh yeah, we were so purist, you know, we go, oh no, it's not about the money. Because we wanted the fucking money. we really wanted the money. And we knew that if we'd get good, we'd earn money. But it's like when me and Johnny decided to go solo, we both individually made more money as solo acts than we did in our double act put together. But both of us had more respect for our double act than we did for our solo shows. By the time we put our solo shows together, we knew how to work a street show. Do you know what I mean? And we knew how to produce a street show. I mean, Johnny actually sat down and he went, right, what makes money? Child, magic,
so
fire.
It's a commercial affair.
He really did put it down, and he did a lovely show. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't his show was very different to most other shows, but he literally did go right, what makes money? You know, what are the things that make money? I am now going to produce a show that's got all those elements in it. It will have fire in it, it will have juggling in it, it will have escapology in it, it will have a child in it, it will have magic in it. And he beautifully put together a show based on that. And funnily enough, he used a double act routine which he did as a solo performer, which was amazing.
Was this much like Eddie Izzard? I heard the style of Eddie Izzard's work there. That came from this Rob Ballard. Was his name?
So Eddie and Rob, who were official touring to begin with, their show, which was just literally a sequence of sketches. That's all it was. It was like a student review show. Really funny, so beautifully done.
So what year is this?
That would be 85 as well.
85, yeah.
And then they started doing sword fighting. They did a fencing show, which again was very, very funny. And then The two of them.
And how was it funny? What was the style of comedy? How was it?
Slapstick. It was a slapstick sword fighting show. So it had an element of skill in it, and it had the danger which you would get with you can put into a circus show. So look, I'm juggling with knives, or I'm juggling with bowling balls or a chainsaw. Actually, there's two guys. If we fuck
this up, it will hurt.
Yeah, two guys with swords actually hacking away at each other.
How did they build the crowd for that? Was there the standard following line kind of hack? Was that around then? Or
you know what? I can't remember how they started their show, to be honest. No, I don't remember.
Was that standard opening, the street line hack? Was that the kind of, you know what I mean? So you walk out on pitch and you start to go, you say you're beginning a show, and then you make a few jokes about people who walk past, and as a waiter.
No, not really. In those days, you literally stood there and basically drew attention to yourself and started gathering an audience, and then you would work with your first line of people to do clapping and cheering. Everybody did clapping and cheering.
And this is 10 people, so you get 10 people.
Yeah, and then you would start the show. The interesting thing in those days as well, in the early days, is nobody did the bottling line before the end of the show. That was an innovation that came from America. We were like,
everyone did bottling lines
at the
after
end.
The show was done.
Got to the end of the show, and then you go,
I do my bottling line. I do my bottling line then at the end.
Where are you going? Yeah, and you do it at the end. Oh, you're very old school. Very old school.
Yeah, I've had to work it because my finale isn't that good in terms of being impressive. It's funny. So you're back in the A5, you're crowd building, and so you're talking, you're saying hello, I'm going to do this and this and this. You get your 10 people, you've got your 10 people, then you clap and cheer, and then
you'd start the show, and then bam, your show would start then, and then it would build from there. And in those days, it was a 30-minute show at Covent Garden. I mean, other people used to overrun, which is eventually why it got stretched to a 40-minute show. I don't know what it is now.
It's 40 minutes with 5 minutes leeway.
Oh, okay. There was always the constant arguments. I imagine there still is about people overrunning, etc., etc.
Oh no, there's not as many arguments, because now if you overrun, you get a ban. If you overrun twice, you get a ban the next day.
Wow.
It's interesting because I talked to Chris Lynham, and he said the beginning of the draw was the time it all became fucked up. He's like, yeah, man, when what was the name of the company who were organising it?
Alternative Arts.
When Alternative Arts came in and they set up the draw and stuff, before we just chatted with each other, it was easy, and then this kind of ruined it, was the thing that came from him for it.
The problem with Alternative Arts was, they were already there when we started, as was explained very clearly to us, street performing is something that happens in between the things that we book on the West Piazza.
It's incidental.
And so what their job was to actually curate acts from around the world, and they brought in some amazing stuff. Right? Don't get me wrong, they brought in some incredible street theatre rather than street theatre. Beautiful.
And what would you say? Just interested in this point. What would you say is the difference between street theatre and street performance?
Street theatre is theatre that happens. Irrespective of your audience. You don't gather the audience. It happens there in its location, and the audience happens to watch it or not notice it's even on. So they, some of these things would be big things that would be set up on the West Piazza, so an audience would actually gather. And you've got to remember, in those days, in the summers in those days, getting an audience was very easy. In the mid 80s.
Can I just say, just so you're saying it's the difference you say between a street theatre show as opposed to a street show is the viewer is not important.
Yeah,
the piece gets done no matter whether the viewer's there or not.
So in the same way that you can do a play, in a rehearsal space, and the play will run exactly as you then do it on opening night. Obviously, not with the same excited energy, etc. A piece of street theatre can run in that same way, and you can take it and you can put it into a space. Now, that's not to denigrate it at all, because I saw some of the most amazing things put on by Alternative Arts. What the big problem with them was they used to book so much, is that we would come along and find that there was no space for us to work, and eventually we went on strike by working when they book things out by saying you can have 1 hour of prime time. That's all, right? And we will
you occupied the space,
and we would occupy the space. And I can always remember Maggie Pinhorn, who ran it, coming up to me and Johnny going, but you're the cool shades. You're nice boys. Why are you doing this to us? And we were like, because we're a union. You know, we're looking after each other. You should recognize that. You're a left-wing organization. Hello, this is what we're doing. You know, we're protecting the workers, and that's us. And, you know, yeah. And so they ran it in a very kind of, you know, during the summer, they brought in a lot of stuff. Of course, for Chris's generation, it got ruined when any organisation came along, because they had a lovely thing that was their own. They had this beautiful performing space, which people just thought they were gods. They could knock out a load of shows because my generation hadn't turned up by that point, so there weren't that many of them. You know, they could do 3-4 shows in a day, and then alternative arts came along and kind of went, "Hello, everybody, come and do shows." And then, you know, sort of wankers like me turn up, and then
did you turn up because of alternative arts?
No, we didn't. No, I turned up purely because I hung out at Covent Garden and I watched shows, and I went, you know, as I said earlier, oh, this is an easy way to earn money, and then discovered that it really wasn't. But
yeah, it's absolutely... well, even when you get shows together, there's a weird thing I think about this than anything else. Like, if you work, I don't know about stand-up, I don't know many other things, but I feel like there's more reliable ways to earn a living than street shows. You do street shows, and
yeah,
like you can be a king one day and you know, in the gutter the next.
Well, you can be a king and in the gutter on the same day. I mean, that's the thing. You know, you can do a show in the morning and absolutely rock it and just be the best thing on legs, and then die on your ass the same day and have all that glory sucked out of you, and just be going home going, I'm a failure and I'll always be a failure. And
so do you go home on a victory, or do you stay and think, fuck, I've had a victory, I'm going to keep going?
Did
you go, you know?
No, I would, if I had a massive victory, I would go home. Yeah, I would kind of go, yeah, do you know what? Yeah, let's
not ruin it.
Yeah, let's keep it at that. But if I was on a kind of, right, I need to pump out shows, and, you know, that's when I'd go down to South Bank. I'd do one at Covent Garden, then go down to South Bank, work further along from the National, and then do.
So you're working up by the Oxo building, that kind of area?
No, there's a space which doesn't exist anymore. If you literally get to the end of the National Theatre building, there was a little space just sticking out there. It's now got a little cafe thing or something on it. But it was myself and Guy Collins, Groovy Guy. We were by the South Bank, by the wheel, and we could just see it had just become horrible and unworkable, unpleasant.
Was it because there's too many people there?
Too many people, but there was also all the guys who'd come to sell tax souvenir shit, and they were just taking up all the space. You know, it became
shell game and that kind of thing. Yeah, illicit trade.
Yeah, it's just horrible. Yeah. And so we both had our bikes, and we got on our bikes, and we literally cycled along,
like the good middle class performers you are.
Yep. And all of a sudden, we got to a point and went, yeah, this feels good. I got off my bike, I started a show, had a lovely show, and it was like, yeah, this is it. Of course, that was the best show I ever had in that space. Do you know what I mean? From then on, it was, right, it's just a hard-working space. But it was, you know...
It's weird, that, isn't it? It's weird. Some pitches you go to, you'll do a show on that pitch, and you'll do a day. Like, I've done days on pitches where it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then you go there the next day and you make nothing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I've stood there for an hour, literally standing there, almost about to do a show, and they're just looking and going, but there's not actually anybody here, you know, because you could see in both directions, so you can see everybody who's coming, and you kind of go, there's 6 people. I can only see 6 people, and that's in 2 different directions. So I'll stand a bit longer, and I'll stand a bit longer.
You know, I think this is something that's lost in modern street festivals. So I think what's happened is, and I think maybe we mentioned this earlier on, I can't remember, there was this divergence, it seems to be diverged between street performers and street festival performers. So street performers, they'll have the slow build. You will look and see 6 people around you and think, fuck it. If I can get 3 or 4 of you to hold, within 10 minutes I'll get another 3 or 4 or 5 of you, and then that'll be a show. And so loads of material comes from that. Whereas if you're doing something which has come from a circus school background, then a stage background, then a street festival background, there isn't that wealth of playful material developed up. You don't have the time to make it.
It's very true. You get years ago, I started working for a group called Manchester International Arts, who are brilliant. They put on all these little festivals on all the satellite towns around Manchester. And first time I went up there, I can't remember which town we were in. I was the only street performer. Everybody else were gig performers. So these guys got paid. They would do their show. They would get paid. And it didn't matter to them if there was anyone in front of them or not. And they would just do their show. And I'm like, well, this is not,
I do because I enjoy it.
Yeah. And it was weird. I did it. I can remember my first show. It was outside of McDonald's. And I said to them, this won't work as a pitch. But I'm telling you now, like, this is not a pitch. It's not going to work. And
I was they were like, tell me to.
Blah, blah, blah. So I did it. And all I got was a bunch of kids at McDonald's who sort of heckling. So I basically sort of metaphorically slapped them all down and said to the very few other people who were there, look, this isn't going to work. It's not going to work as a show. So I apologize. Hope you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, And I did cigarette vanish for them and went, that's a little gift for you. Off you go. The organisers thought it was brilliant. And I'm like, hang on, I just died.
That was me bottling.
Yeah, I just literally went, no, this ain't going to work. They were like, oh, no, that was brilliant. And I'm like, no, you don't know what a street show is then. You know what.
But people don't. That's the weird thing. You that's the strangest thing. And I know this for a fact is I watch shows and I think, how do you work? How are people enjoying this fucking show? There's no high points, no low points.
Yeah.
There's nothing interesting going. There's nothing interesting being said. How are you enjoying it? But people do because they're not watching through our eyes.
Yes, exactly. And that's what you've got to do that thing of an audience. Unless they are an audience who've watched lots of live performance, they are fresh to this. And if somebody is a really good hack performer, they will entertain that audience, and they will have skills, and they will have timing, they will have delivery, they will have the material, and they will do a very good job. And those people will laugh and clap and walk away, and they will have enjoyed themselves. And they may have even got something meaningful out of it. That's the bit I'm not sure about.
Potentially from the echoes of stuff.
Yeah. But that was always my biggest downfall, is that my mood was always too close to the surface. And if I felt the show wasn't going well, you could really see it. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't someone who could hack my way through. In
the way of modern terminology, you kind of went suicide bomber on it. You take yourself out and everyone in the audience with you.
I would quite often, and I would do things like.
Do you know a performer called Melvin?
Yeah.
You losers, you dream killers, player haters.
Yeah, I mean that's never quite as bad as Melvin in that way, but. I would die because I didn't believe that I could succeed. Do you know what I mean? Rather than just going, I can just hack my way through this, and the material will bounce me along. Is it
just that, or is it the fact that you want to? And this is the reason why I said, and I've said earlier on, I can't remember what point we were making, but I said I enjoy this. It was meant to be quite a weighty, off the hand comment about street performances, that we go out there and do these shows because we enjoy to do them, and you can walk off them.
That's
you can turn around and say, you're looking at me like a cunt. Well, I think you're a cunt. And walk off.
I always remember the first year I met Butterfly Man, Robert Nelson. We'd met him in Edinburgh, and we'd then persuaded him to come to Ireland to do a festival there. We were going over to Cork or Dublin, I can't remember which. This is when I was still in my double act. And he'd come along, and, he was just amazing. He was absolutely brilliant. Then we get to Covent Garden. And me and Johnny do our first show in Covent Garden. Now, we've been in Edinburgh for 3 weeks. We've been in Ireland for 4 days. We'd had just 4 weeks, basically, of joy. We start this show in Covent Garden, and about 5 minutes in, we both look at each other and go, I'm bored. Are you bored? Yeah, I'm bored. And we turned to the audience and we went, I can't remember which one of us said it. We all said, look, basically, we've just had a month of the most lovely shows possible, and this isn't happening. so we're going to go off now. So thank you very much. And Robert Nelson stood there going, oh my God, I don't believe you did that. And we went, well, yeah, we're being honest. We weren't enjoying it, so we've come off. And
But this is a festival. You're being paid to be there, right?
No, this is a Covent Garden. No, this.
Okay,
this is Covent Garden. Because we were back in the office again, and it was just it wasn't a festival show anymore. And
there's a weird joy in that, isn't there? Telling the crowd to go fuck themselves, albeit through different mediums. It's strange. And can I ask you this? Do you think it's because they are a bad audience who are literally watching you to want you to fail, or is it because we're prissy, sensitive fuckers and we're not getting the love that we deserve? I think
it's the prissy, sensitive fuckers. Basically, that you can occasionally go, oh, there is nothing I can do for this audience. There is nothing between me and them. Somebody else might come out here and absolutely kill it, but there is nothing that I can do here. But sometimes it is, you get to a point and you go, my timing isn't right. I haven't read you properly. I'm not going to put the work in now to save it. So I'm going to blame
autopilot to the end, or
you're all wrong. I mean, I'm going to use Andre as an example of this. Bless him. He one year we were in Tiskelling, and he comes up to me and goes, "Oh, mate, I've got
Tiskelling." Before we go to Tiskelling, it's festival
in Holland. Sorry, in Earl.
It's festival in Holland. The year is
let's say 90s. Some point,
early 90s.
But the thing that actually happened was in Glastonbury. So and I only remember because he was there and he went, oh, I've got 7 o'clock on Saturday night in the cabaret tent at Glastonbury. It's like, wow, like top banana. This is just brilliant. This is going to be brilliant. And he was dead chuffed about it. He was looking forward to it so much. That's what he would talk about. And so I went along. Loads of people went along to see him. And there had been a perfect storm on before him of 3 different acts, including Mark Thomas.
Thomas, a political comedian.
I think Mark Thomas was on before him, but there had been just this amazing 3 different high-level acts, bang, 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 bang. And then Andre came on at the wrong moment. Basically, the whole audience went, oh, we don't know who you are. That's it. And they had been a joyous audience up to that point, and nothing.
And was it because of a difference in tone? Was it a difference in the style of work?
It was. No, I think it literally was. Unless you were a television celebrity, doesn't matter who you were going to die on in that moment, because the audience had sat through 3 different shows. The last one of which had been the celebrity performer, which had been just absolutely brilliant. And what they wanted was for someone to come out that they go, yeah, we know who you are. They didn't. Do
you think there's a credence in that? Do you think there's a credence in the fact that if you're a scene character, if people see you on telly, you don't have to be as good?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Absolutely. You're already 3/4 of the way there.
Why do you think that?
It's familiarity. The audience go, oh yeah, we like you. There's Steve Martin.
Do you think they want to know who you are? They want to instantly settle into a nice cozy cushion.
It's that delight in going, oh, we can sit back, we don't have to work. There's a brilliant video of Steve Martin in one of these great big arena things back in the late 70s when he was
doing the Great Fucking Dini, or
no, it's just doing a stand-up. And he's starting off with just doing lines from characters that he's done. And the audience are going absolutely mad. It was my first introduction to Steve Martin as a stand-up. I'd watched all his films because me and Nick Nicholas have gone to Steve Martin all-nighter at the Scala in King's Cross. And I hated him. And I hated him because he wasn't having to do anything. The audience were just treating him as a comedy god. And then
this live stage performance, yes.
And then as the performance went on, of course, I loved him because he was such a skilled performer. But he wasn't having to do any work at that point because the audience were like, "Yeah, you're Steve Martin. We love you. We love you." So Andre comes on.
They bought into him before he'd even worked. Yeah.
So bless him. Andre comes on
back at the festival. Yeah. Mark Thomas has just been on.
Stormed.
Yeah.
Andre comes on, and they will not accept him. Nothing he does, they will accept. they literally, the audience just turned on, and I'm sat there kind of going, oh my God. And I could see it happen. And you could see that there was nothing that Andre was going to be able to do to save the show. There was nothing.
And what was Andre's work? What was he trying to present?
It was basically stand-up.
And so difficult then as well, because they've got to like you for that.
Yeah. So basically what he did, he went, right, well, I'm going to leave the tent now, and I'm going to take the radio mic with me. I'm going to go for a walk around the festival, and if anybody wants to come with me, you can. So he comes down off the stage and walks through the audience, and probably, I reckon 30 to 50 people got up and went with him. And you could
out of a collective amount of people,
1,000 people, in the tent.
Oh wow! So it's like a small tribe.
It's and you can hear his voice sort of getting fader and fader, quieter and quieter. And a security guard got up on the stage in his high vis jacket, stood there, and did an old joke, and the audience absolutely rocked with laughter. And he did about 5 or 6 really old, hackneyed mother-in-law jokes, and the audience treated him as a comedy god.
Do you know what? When you're getting your volunteer out, isn't that the kind of thing? You get your volunteer out, and you're watching someone who doesn't usually do it coming out of the shell, and that's the empathy of that moment. And so when your security guards walk to stage, they say, "For God's sake, Jeff, go on stage and save this." Yeah. Jeff's walked on there. Tried to tell his fucking jokes, and people have just been happy that he's tried to save the moment.
It was just bizarre. So he had Andre, this incredibly experienced, skilled performer, just in that wrong moment with the audience. And
what happened with his little exodus?
He just eventually his voice faded out as the microphone, got further away, and that was it.
But did he take his 50 people until they were better lads?
I don't know where they went. They were never again. Yeah. It was, but it's that kind of. But see, that's the kind of thing I love. I mean, for Andre at that moment, that was horrible, because he'd been in his head been building up to that glorious gig he was going to have. But it's the kind of thing as a performer you go, oh, this is,
And do you think he didn't do himself any favors in any moments? Do you think he walked out there with a sense of entitlement, or do you think he was adversarial, or?
Very possibly. See, I don't actually remember anything that he did. All I remember was the audience going, no. And so, it could have been that he walked out with too much kind of confidence, and then they're going, well, we don't know who you are. Why are you so confident? It could have been that they wanted some kind of apology first, or a sort of, hello, this is me, love me,
some rapport building.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I suppose the thing as well is the desire for love is a show of a lack of confidence. If you go out there, it's such a complicated
have that.
trade.
Yeah, it is a weird. It's a weird thing, but it's that there was the thing is, whatever happened wasn't Andre's fault. Do you know what I mean? Andre stepped into a trap.
But don't you think he should blame himself for not dodging the sun trap and not putting the right weighed bag of dust on the pillar in the Indiana Jones mechanism?
Yeah, I'm just imagining that. He had been backstage and everybody had been absolutely killing it. And he was just thinking, oh, it's Glastonbury, it's going to be lovely. It's, and just walking out there going, oh, God, this is going to be good. Shit. Yeah, what's happened? And we've all died on our asses in unexpected ways.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've got an interview coming up with some guys in a little while where I did a show in Berlin where I drank too much and took all my clothes off on stage. And I've got the guys from an American traveling sideshow who are going to come and chat on the interview about this stuff, because I remember very little about it. But we all have these fucking moments.
Yeah. Have you heard the story of Dirty Fred giving birth?
Well, I've heard many stories of Dirty Fred, and in fact, thank you for reminding me. Someone who we have to get on the show at some point, if that's a possibility.
Absolutely,
I spent some time with him at the South Bank. He recycled more crowds than a performer I've ever seen. Everyone was laughing. Everyone laughed. But then they spend 5 minutes and they're like, yeah, that's my fill. That's enough. I've got enough now. I'm going to move on. And I talked to him and he'd say this thing, actually, reminded me. You made me think of him earlier on when you talk about festivals and getting through material. He said, yeah, man, you do festivals. You just got to get out there and just deliver your material,
Yeah.
And so he'd go out there and do his one ball between one hand thing. Tell me when it's boring. 5 minutes of throwing one ball from a left hand to a right hand. As a performer, it's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, you should ask him about when he gave birth on stage in Germany.
Please tell me the story.
Well,
we can at a later date,
he produced this amazing prop, which was under his shirt. And he'd stand on stage and he'd just say, right, I'm going to do a tribute now to life and death and birth and blah, blah, blah. And he would go into this really properly serious talk about life and death. And he'd start to undo his shirt. And you hadn't noticed anything. You noticed that the guy's got a bit of a gut on him. That's all. Yeah. And he gets down and he opens his shirt. So he's down to here, right? Whoops.
Yeah.
And
framing, my friend, framing.
Sorry. And you notice there's a sack, an opaque sack, in which you can see a fetus. And he would just tear this, and fluid would just pour out. And
white fluid, like
just kind of clear, you know, like water's breaking kind of fluid.
Yeah.
And he would bring out this really lifelike looking fetus, and with an umbilical cord on, and audiences would be just like, what was this? But he did this in Bremen. I think it was Bremen, because I was there the weekend after and I got told about this. So they do a cabaret show at night, and he does this, and they said the silence was a silence that you'd never experienced before in the audience. It wasn't the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of a very full room, which didn't know what the fuck
to do.
Literally didn't know what to do. Like total, utter silence. And basically, he had to be taken off the stage. And I can't remember who it was who was comparing it, but supposedly they did the most amazing 10 minutes getting the audience back into a semblance of.
So what? He was taken off stage during the routine? Like, when did people come out with fucking hooks and crooks?
I think.
How far did he get? Well, how did this finish? Like,
he'd given birth. And he was stood there, but he had to basically.
What, so did he spend a few minutes just looking weird with a baby in his arms, going like, look at it, like, look at my baby?
The mayor of the town went to Reiner, who was the organizer, and said he can't work in this town anymore, and literally got kicked out of town. Yeah, amazing.
Oh, isn't that weird? Especially as well, because I know the way Dirty Fred he would make it look filthy when he was doing it. I only watched him for a show. I watched him for a month. Like, we hung out for a month on a pitch.
Right.
And one of the nice things about street performances, when I'm talking about a lot of these people that are kind of legends, I've been around for almost long enough for some of the guys to have some experience of working on pitch with them. It's not something you get, I think, in a lot of other industries.
No. I mean, it is a lovely thing to, if you get the chance to share a pitch with somebody who's a bit kind of godlike in their abilities. So like me and Johnny shared a pitch in Edinburgh with Chris Piss one day, and I don't know why, because it was the main pitch where everyone works, but for some reason
Chris Lynham.
Chris Lynham. And we just back and forth between the two of us all day long. And this one particular show is probably his third or fourth show. He started it off, and then he went, fuck it, I'm not going to do it. No, fuck it, not going to do it. And he gathered an audience by saying he wasn't going to do a show and by telling people to fuck off. And me and Johnny, we're in our second or third year performing. No, probably second year. We're just stood there going, "You're a god. You're just a god. You're telling people to fuck off. You're saying you're going to do the fucking show, and you're getting a big audience, and they're loving you, and you're still telling them, yeah." And it was brilliant to watch. And that's the one thing where, you see shows and you go, "Oh, I hate everything you do," and then you see shows and you go, "Oh, do you know what? It's just such a privilege to be here. To be actually watching what you do at this moment in time. I think you're amazing. And it's just, it's absolutely lovely to have had that opportunity and to have seen so many people and go, "Oh, you're amazing. You're just brilliant. I'm loving it." And you even see, people in situations where you think, well, actually, though, this is shit, but you're incredible, and what you're doing is incredible. And I can see the four people.
Rumpold, he's made an entire career off that.
See, for me, Rumpole is the thing I love about Rumpole is that he is outside performing, in a way that he's like the audiences. Everybody watches Rumpole as if he's a car crash of some sort, as if he is something.
Exact words that were used to describe him by somebody else in a previous interview.
Yeah,
he said it's like watching a beautiful car crash.
Yeah, you don't know why you're watching. I mean, the first time I ever met him in a wood at 3 o'clock in the morning in Holland, with his nose half hanging off, going, "Oh, crikey, yeah, I'll be living in the woods." You know, and
yeah, he's a clown. For everyone who doesn't know, he's a clown.
Yeah.
So his nose hanging off is.
He dresses as a medieval jester. He has a big nose. He was the principal clown for Cirque du Soleil in Las Vegas for a while, which is one of the most weird things possible. And he's famous for doing duration shows. So 36 hours he's done.
I think 48. He did 48, I think, and he was going up to 50 odds. Yeah, apparently, the festival he's working for told him, like, no, you can't do that long. You're going to die.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, I've seen him do 24 hours at Glastonbury. And people just bring him food, and he'll eat the food bouncing on his spring shoes with three people.
Shit. This is one of the questions they're given. Like Byron said, like, what's going on? Does he take a shit? Like, does he piss? Like, what?
I don't know about. That's a good. Do you know what? I've never asked that question.
His ablutions.
Yeah, I don't know. He probably does. He probably goes off and leaves his stuff there, and there'll be 4 or 5 people.
Doesn't surprise me. I mean, I watched him work in Glastonbury once, and I've heard stories, many stories. One I've mentioned before about him getting out of a transit van with Pepe and somebody else. I can't remember the other person. Really sorry who it is. It's not personal. And climbing into a field with a scarecrow and standing as a scarecrow. And people turning around to him and going, "Guys, we've got to go to the next place. We're on the next step of the venue. What the fuck are you doing?" He's going, "Oh, go on, guys. It's fine. Yeah, don't worry. I'm all right, mate. Yeah, you go."
Yeah. Yeah, that would be Rumpole. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
he's got that.
When you say epiphany, I had the similar epiphany watching him that everything can go wrong and it's okay, and that was such a lovely thing to see.
Yeah,
and
that is the I don't know when I discovered that the idea that it doesn't matter if it doesn't work, but it was the greatest thing I ever discovered, and it's more relevant in. Say if you're at somewhere like Glastonbury where you have an audience which should just go with you. If when I'm comparing, I've always gone on it doesn't matter if I'm funny. It really doesn't matter. You know, that's not the point.
You're a sinew.
Yeah, it's a lovely because then an audience can relax as well because an audience knows also that well if it fucks up it doesn't matter to him, so it's not going to matter to us, and we'll just enjoy watching him mess up, and
we're just here to have fun.
Yeah, and that's when you can get moments, you know, like I said with the big clapping and cheering thing, where the audience decide to take control, where the audience go, well, we're actually an equal part of this. I used to have it Lee Hurst's club when I used to compare there back in the early 10s, 90s, whatever. There were nights there where the audience at the end of the night would start heckling me in the weirdest way. The most fun way, and that was purely them just going, yeah, we've enjoyed you now and we're just going to have fun now and just kind of see if we can mess up your head because we can see you enjoy it and you're not, you know.
And so what do you see about the thing of taking the experience from street and the style of street work and then working it onto a stage and working it for moments, you know, because you make moments on street.
Yeah,
making moments on stage is different.
One thing I'd say is that if you take a good street performer and put him inside, he will always succeed because a good street performer knows exactly how to work an audience. When you take a bad street performer and put him inside, you see somebody ignoring the audience that's in front of them completely and just doing mechanics, which is really irritating.
But I always saw that as something where you see a bad stage performer coming off the street, that's what you see them doing.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, definitely. You've got that kind of that thing of where you're not acknowledging the relationship between you and the audience, whether that's being successful or not, but you're not acknowledging that and you're just doing something. You know, I've never been surprised when street performers have gone into a variety setting and absolutely stormed it because there is a performer or a double act or whatever who've worked for literally years, day after day after day, to make a show work. And then they're suddenly in a situation where they don't have to work and they can relax because the audience are there. They're not going anywhere. They're not having to fight with them in any way. And they absolutely blow the roof off the place. You know, it's just...
Well, I'd say it's like you're someone who's been a compere for a long time. You've seen a lot of acts. You've seen a lot of the wilderness. I keep drawing on. I know people hate it, and people tell me not to talk about myself in this interview too much, but I'll do it anyway because it's my point of reference. I killed every gig I've ever got booked for on a cabaret ever, but I very rarely get counter bookings after that because my style is very streety,
Right.
very chatty, very playful.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think bookers like that. It doesn't feel like bookers like that.
No, they don't, and there's an odd thing where I can get away with that as a compere, because I'm not the act. But what in cabaret, what they can't get their heads around is they can't get their heads around a show that is only about the relationship between the performer and the audience. What they want is a show, and in their experience, that show can be a stand-up. You know, it can be a really scatty kind of stand-up, but it's a thing. Do you know what I mean? But when it's somebody who comes in and seems to ignore the rules and is successful, I mean, we noticed this a lot in the 80s. A lot of cabaret venues hated good street performers in their venues because good street performers seem to ignore their rules and still do really well. And they seem to do really well quite easily. And I think a lot of bookers objected to that. They wanted to see someone who was of their craft, and as in the variety cabaret style of craft, and had to work at it. You know, they could go, oh yeah, when
it's too accessible.
Yeah,
to be a good street performer. If you've learned how to work a crowd, you've learned how to pump a crowd.
Yeah,
you could go and do a successful street show.
Yeah,
is that the thing they kind of they look down as the accessibility of it?
I think they just didn't. What they saw was somebody coming in being not too ragged, and even though that performer would come in and absolutely blow the roof off the place, it's like if you Rob and Eddie, whenever they did cabaret, and they hardly
Rob
ever
Ballard,
got Eddie Izzard, as official touring. They hardly ever got booked again, and they always blew the top off places because
is that weird?
Yeah, a lot of it was to do to the fact that, and I think possibly as well, was especially in the 80s, there was a kind of thing where if you were a street show, you were a children's entertainer because your show was aimed at families.
Family show.
Yeah. So it wasn't that it wasn't edgy, but it wasn't dirty. It didn't, it had a
but street shows have a lot of blue in them and a lot of kind of
they didn't in the 80s.
Really? Like we talk about Chris Lynham. Chris Lynham walked around naked with a firecracker in his arms.
At the end of his show, he did. As his finale. But no, he was different in that he used to physically assault his audience. I mean, I still held with great pride.
Would you describe it is it play or physical assault? Or would you?
It hurts because he hit me once. And I mean, it was probably the first year at Covent Garden, and I was sat in the front row of his audience because I just wanted to watch him.
Starry-eyed, I see.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And he made a joke. I laughed out loud. He walked straight up to me and went, "How dare you laugh at that? That was sexist." Took his hat off and smacked me round the head, and it really friggin' hurt. It was a proper.
Was it the right amount of really hurt, or was it the right amount?
Oh no, it was quite. Oh my God, that genuinely.
Do you think that's indicative of a change in the sentiment of one's audience now?
Without a doubt. I mean, you.
I mean, I watched Chris 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7, 8, 9 years ago. Not that long ago, but a time ago. Grab a kid and put a gun to his head, and it's a starting pistol. It's gone off a few times before. If he puts that starting pistol off in the kid's head, it's going to kill the kid. And the audience, when I saw it, I thought it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. Cheer, otherwise the kid gets it, and he's got a gun to the kid's head. Yeah, it's hilariously funny.
I remember, was it Keno doing a show, a late night show at Covent Garden, and the bin lorry used to come through at a particular time in the evening, And the bin lorry came through. He walked up in front of the bin lorry, stopped the bin lorry, got a kid, laid the kid down in front of the bin lorry, pulled his beret up to look like a bishop's hat, blessed the child, and then beckoned the bin lorry to drive over the child. And I look at it, I think of it now, I go, oh yeah, that's just a gag. That's quite funny. I had never seen a gag like that at that point, and neither did the audience. And I was like, oh my God, you've just made a joke about bin man, you can drive over this child. And, you know, literally.
I mean, it feels like we're talking about the same point over and over again, but what do you think percolated that creative environment? Because the terms of lying down, someone drive over me, that's something that feels old hat now. It seems like you're saying it didn't feel old hat then.
No,
at least for you guys.
No, not for me. I mean, you got to remember, I was about 20 years old. I had never really performed before I got to Covent Garden. I'd done little bits of acting at school, things like that. The young ones were on the telly. Were they on the telly then? I don't know. But, you know, they're
83, I think, for the young ones.
Right. So the young ones have been on telly. So anything that was that anarchic, you'd only seen on television, you know, and very rarely. To see it done live in front of an audience without apology, without oh, it's just a joke. There was none of that. No one ever apologized. That was really weird. That was one thing we couldn't get used to with American performers, was they would apologize for their jokes, and that freaked us out as British performers. We were like, no, you can't take the piss and then say sorry. You can't go, oh, only kidding, buddy. You don't do that. You take the piss and then you take the piss again, you know. And if it hasn't, you know, and if it's working, you take the piss again.
I heard this thing. I went on as a young performer. I was literally on the last ever publicperformance.net, as it was publicperformance.net.
Oh, okay.
Instead of how it's become ye olde street performers on the Facebook now. And one of the things I heard was you never apologize for a joke. If you're going to set your trajectory to that point, you keep it going.
Yeah, absolutely.
You see it through.
Yeah, and it was weird, because the Americans had that sensibility of, you know, everything's got to be nice and you know, and so they would make the apology afterwards. I'm only kidding, buddy, you know. And we were like, why? You've just killed your joke. You're
a character playing a bit.
Yeah, you've got you know. I mean, I got to tell there's one story about Chris Lynham, which in '89 Glastonbury, when I was comparing the Mama and Dada tent, he was on as the finale act every night, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And the tent would pack out an hour before he was on with his audience waiting for him. So people getting in there to make sure they could see. Because it wasn't a big tent. It wasn't like the cabaret tent. It wasn't massive. And this one particular night, he does a cookery show and he has a wooden oven and he's dressed in a big dress and with a wig on. And he mixes up all this stuff in a bowl. And the audience is sat there going, well, he's going to throw the bowl of food over us. He's going to throw the flour over. So none of this.
When's this going to happen?
You know, but none of this happens. He puts the bowl, the big china bowl, into this oven and shuts the door, and then just stands there, and nothing happens. And the audience is sat there, and everybody's been waiting for him to assault them in some way, because he's assaulted the audience every night. And all of a sudden, the oven literally explodes, like this huge bang. And the oven explodes like this into the audience. Now I'm watching from the side because, you know, I had the lovely thing of always getting a front row seat at the side. And there's total silence of shock in the audience. And all of us during this silence, part of the door of the oven, this jagged piece of plywood, gets thrown from the audience onto the stage and just lands. And everybody sees this jagged, like knife edge piece of wood, which has flown in directly at them. And everyone goes, ooh. And then in that moment, the other part of the door gets thrown onto the stage and lands. And the audience now are like, oh. And this girl in the audience goes, that was really stupid. That was really stupid. And the atmosphere has gone from up here to it's below the floor. It's dead. Everybody sat there kind of going, yeah, you actually could have hurt us. This is too much. And she's going, this is really dangerous. You know, we've loved your show up till now, blah, 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 blah. And I'm
has she stood up to say this?
Yeah, no, she just sat in the audience. And
she's saying quite loudly, so everyone can hear.
Remember, it's not a big tent. There's probably maybe 150, 200 capacity in this tent. Okay, this is in the early days of cabaret at Glastonbury. And, you know, I'm sat there kind of going, oh, God, this is it. It's over. It's finished. It's done, you know. And Chris picks up the door, and he picks up at this door, and he just goes, bam, and he smacks himself really hard on the head with the door, and he goes, whoa, God, that does hurt, doesn't it? And he goes, bam, and hits himself again. He goes, yeah, this is really dangerous. And then just starts to beat himself to death with this door. And the audience begin to titter during this as he's beating himself, and he's down lying on the stage, just hitting himself, going, oh my God, you're right, this hurts. I was so stupid. And they're beginning to laugh. And then he sits up and he looks straight out and he goes, and she's wearing glasses. And at that point, the whole place just erupted in laughter. And I'm sat at the side going, oh, you're a fucking God. I'm sorry. You've just saved a situation that was so dead, and you'd killed it. And everybody agreed that you'd killed it. And now they are all just thinking you're a comedy genius again. And I was just like there kind of going,
but you know this Bruce Lee idea, the Jeet Kune Do, use one's enemies' energy against themselves.
Yes.
And there's no enemies in this situation, but you know, there's kind of some element of there's a negative vibe coming at the audience.
Yeah.
Coming from the audience to him for something he's misjudged, or they feel like he's misjudged. And he's managed to take that and then really focus it to the point of absurdity. Yeah, someone could have got hurt. Yeah. I'm going to fucking hurt myself to the point where you fucking have to start laughing about this self-flagellation.
It was just brilliant. But yeah, it was just and she's wearing glasses was just such a beautiful.
Do you think that this is an interesting point to go back to other videos that I've done talking about stuff? Do you think that would look good on camera? You remember that to this day? And how many years ago? That's 15, 20 years ago, something like that?
I don't know. You see, the thing is, with you put anything on camera, for something to work on camera, you've got to have multi-camera angles. You've got to have, for it to work on a television, you've got to have the audience's point of view when he looks at her and sees that she's wearing glasses and points it out to the audience. You've got, do you know what I mean? You've got to have.
So do you think this is the reason street shows don't look good on camera? Is because of this thing there's not perspective? But
also there isn't the emotional content there, and the emotional content is with the audience. It's in that you've got that triumvirate, haven't you? You've got performer, audience, act, and basically when you put the three of them together in a live place, when it's the performance that does it, you've got to be there. Now, stand-up comedy works because it's the material and the performance of the material, and that can be just voice. You can listen to a stand-up tape and find it funny. You may have found it funnier live, but it will still work when you're finding it funny. But if you're in an audience of a street show from the very beginning, and you are there for all of the material and the energy that the performer's putting out, and you are part of that growth, and you know, because the audience talking about it, the performer's talking about the fact that there's only the six of you, and we're going to do this thing, and we're going to get this thing together, and we're going to make this happen. You're part of that growth, and you're part of that experience, and you can't get that if you're on telly. It's like Bill Ferguson's crowd gathering gag, which is, "Hey buddy, have you seen my trick with her?" I don't know if he basically would just say,
I don't know the guy. He's been mentioned throughout many videos now, to the point where I have to go research him now. I have to have some knowledge of him.
Basically, he would just say to somebody in the audience, "Hey buddy, have you seen my trick with the hat?" And the guy would be wearing a hat and go, "No, give me a hat. Hey buddy, give me a hat. And the guy would throw his hat in, and he'd just put it in his case and just carry on and ignore the bloke completely. And then he'd say to somebody else, "Buddy, have you just got here? And the guy would go, "Yeah. Have you seen the trick with the shoe? Buddy, give me your shoe." And so the audience is going, "Oh, he's going to steal the guy's shoe."
What era is this? What year?
So I first
80s.
Yeah, I first met him in the 80s.
Because you know that route, you know the joke where you grab a lighter off somebody and you go, you put the lighter in your pocket. You go, "Has anyone else got a lighter?"
Yeah. See, that's even.
Is that the root? Is that the root of this? Maybe.
The original gag with the lighters is supposedly Butterfly Man, Pier 39, where there was some kind of a promotional thing happening, and they had lighters that they were giving away, and he took an entire bag of these lighters, and they became the punchline to that gag, where he would go, "Oh, can I borrow a lighter?" And then basically put it in his pocket, and then bring out the entire bag of lighters, which would go on the floor. And that came from
so Butterfly Man is the originator for this gag, then?
Supposedly, yeah.
Okay.
I don't, but you know, all these things. You know, I could always remember John Feely talking about when Mike Mulcairn, who I mentioned earlier, came back to Covent Garden, and John Feely persuaded him to do a show with him. And Mike Mulcairn did the gag about "Don't clap with your hands in your pockets." Johnny went at the end of the show. He goes,
"It really hurts."
I don't believe you did that. I don't believe you did that old gag. And he went, "Fuck off, mate. I invented it. It's my line." And it was like, you know, it's been going so long, nobody knows where it came from. And then the guy who invented it goes, "No, that was actually my gag."
Conversation I had with Brian Reed a lot. Brian Reed is the reason that I personally tried to make more creative material.
Yeah.
Because I went to Covent Garden and did I watched Sparky Mark. He's on Friday. Sparky, we have a long chat.
Cool.
I think it's very interesting. I watched his show, other shows, watched power shows, and I made a power show. It wasn't a creative show, but it was a power show. And when I met Brian, he kind of called me out as a hack. I know this is boring, everyone, and I've said this in lots of interviews. I know you're asking me not to repeat myself, but you stupid fuckers, I want the same response from lots of people about the same question. So allow it if you can. So he talked about being hack, and he said that when you begin doing a street show, it's about your voice and you write it. And there's no hack material. Hack material is just material that's been stolen. It's been stolen so much that it's kind of got this bubble effect in information where you can just draw from it.
Yeah. We used to call it standard lines.
Yeah, that's what we say. Generic stock, standard, you know. And so the discussion that Guy wants to have with Brian that we're trying to organise at the moment, but unfortunately Brian's internet isn't perfect, and Brian being a guy who has suffered from tuberculosis and lung problems, we don't want to just send someone over there to give him stuff.
Yeah, sure.
You know, but the debate they're having anyway, to not try and be too long about this, is whether when you begin doing a show, you begin with stock. This is what I did, and I would argue against doing this, and I'm a bit of a hypocrite for doing it. You start with stock, and then you write your own stuff. You evolve to writing your own thing.
Yeah.
Or do you start being original? Do you start with your own voice? And I'm sure you can imagine whose side, between Guy Collins arguing and Brian, who's arguing which side.
It's quite funny because historically, me and my double partner, we started with completely original voice, and then we started introducing hackery into our shows because we didn't know enough standard stuff. Do you see what I mean? And then sort of bit by bit you try and get rid of material. What's really weird is when somebody
try and get rid of standard material. So are you? What you're saying is you began original.
Yeah.
And you started with this. You went out there. You did your, as you described in the other moments of describing stuff. Did your thing and oh fuck, this isn't going to work. This is far too complicated, or there's something in this that isn't going to function this medium. And you looked around and saw what other people were doing, and then basically acquired stock and formed the show. Stock
kind of. It's just you suddenly found yourself in a situation where a line you've heard somebody else do, or a really standard line, will suddenly save that situation for you, or will help that situation, or you're finding it really difficult to gather an audience. So you go, well, right, I'm going to use this, and this that I've found before. I can remember one year at Glastonbury, all the stuff I did at Glastonbury was all original Glastonbury Pacific material, and lots of what I do at Glastonbury is completely improvised anyway, so it only ever gets done once. And one year I decided that I wasn't going to use any of the material that I'd built up over the last however many Glastonburys I'd done, 10 Glastonburys or whatever. I was going to go new. Everything would be new. The problem was I didn't actually do any preparation, so I didn't.
Typical stream performer here.
So I didn't say anything funny Friday, Saturday, and Sunday until I introduced the last act on the Sunday. I came up with my new bit of material. I had avoided saying anything I'd done before, but I'd also avoided being funny in any way whatsoever.
But were you testing material and it wasn't funny, or you were just being safe?
I was literally trying to improvise on the spot, as I always did, but I was improvising without a base. Whereas before, I would have them with the Glastonbury material that I would use, and I could improvise off that.
But this is the thing, I found this hard. I want to do stand-up. I really desperately want to do stand-up. And I do what it appears like, possibly Lee Ross and people like that were the originator of this verbal following.
Yeah.
I really love verbal following.
First person I saw do it.
Yeah. And so I love doing that. And I believe that I've got reasonably creative ideas doing it. I can spend an hour doing that stuff. You know? You put me on a stage doing stand-up and I'm lost within the first 30 seconds, because
see, stand-up is different. Stand-up, you've got to have structure. Your audience in stand-up.
Risa, it's a long interview. I need to take a piss. Can you fill? Right, yeah.
Well, I'll fill. Right, you go for a pee. I'm going to fill. All right, then, everybody. What should we talk about? Let me think.
Talk about what you're talking about for. Carry on.
Okay.
So I can hear you.
So in stand-up, basically, your audience needs a structure. They need, and they're expecting a kind of beginning, middle, and end, and a punchline, and they've got to know that you are heading towards something. And it doesn't matter how long you take to get there. If they trust you all the way, it's absolutely fine. But stand-up is not something that you can go and improvise with unless you let the audience know that, and unless you are basically, if you're the compare, there's one thing that I love doing comparing is because that gave you permission to do that. That gives you permission to improvise. I'm gonna have to turn the light on in there. But it's otherwise, you need more of a structure because they need to know that they're heading towards a laugh. They're going to get a little laugh on the way, or they're going to get, the big laugh at the end. And so, you've got to actually kind of, split whatever you're doing up into those little moments. Matt, now you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah.
I'm just going to go quickly turn the light on. Okay, it's very dark.
Yeah, cool. Crack on, mate. No worries. Time has passed. So I find that very interesting. For me, like with stand-up, the struggle I have with stand-up is that when you're performing and you're doing verbal following.
Fabulous. I'm back.
Verbal following is something that's quite accessible. You can look, you can see stuff, and providing you understand the structures that most verbal following jokes work under, you can be creative quite easily. You can watch someone and you can go, right, I understand what people think this person might be, and I can understand joke structures I know and how to work a joke into this thing and be creative. Whereas when you're doing a bit of stand-up, it's a completely different skill set. Yeah,
when you're doing stand-up, your material is not about the audience, and your material has to exist outside of the audience. You're going to get on stage and you're going to present your material to them. You can present it as a conversation and you can interact with them while you do it, but your material has to exist outside of them, or it must seem like that your material exists because of them. And you are their best mate, and they're because
I like the idea of just walking on stage and just talking to people, going, "Where are you from?" Bada bada ba.
Yeah, that works as a compare, but they don't really accept it if you're the act. And comedy audiences are funny like that. They'll go, right, yeah, you're the act. You can only ask us where we're from once or twice. We need to hear material from you because the compare has already found out who the room is, et cetera, et cetera. He's already had the chat with us. We need now you to be basically providing us with laughs that we don't have to think
content.
about.
We want content. Yeah. I mean, I like the idea of content being made in the moment, but it seems like street shows, you can go like, okay, you're all here now. Let's see what the fuck we're going to do. Whereas with a comedy set and a stand-up gig, you can go, right, we're all here now. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. It's very much that. And I mean, I'm sure there are geniuses out there who can improvise their way through these things and are brilliant at it. But I mean, that's why that's why I prefer to do comparing, is because if I did my material and my material died when I was doing a set, that was me dying. If my material dies when I'm comparing, it didn't matter. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a problem. Whereas
you're the sinew.
So it doesn't
thing connect the bits apart.
Yeah.
I mean, I can empathise. I've compared quite happily, and from my street show experience, I can compare.
Yeah.
I'm not the best compare ever, I don't have all the skills. Generally, when things go wrong and they say Phil, I'll have a kind of black hole will open underneath my feet, which will drag my feeling of self-worth through it. But I can do it because I've done street shows. I know how to work a crowd.
Yeah.
You know, when you ask me to deliver my own material on stage, like there's no idea more scary and horrifying for me than that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's that then you get that suddenly you don't have the confidence to just say any old bollocks. You kind of go, well, actually, this has to work now. And if it doesn't work, that's me not working. That's me failing.
It's got to be cogent and concise.
Yeah, and it's got to work. And it's an odd thing. But you talk to any stand-up, all stand-ups have died with their best material. You know, they've all had those moments where the material that has absolutely worked every single time has just died on its arse. Just like any live performer, it's that thing of you just got to go, right, well, this is the material I do. It's either good or it isn't.
Any advice to people who are trying to write stuff, particularly on the street, but also on stage and doing comparing stuff as well?
It's all, for me, it's all about, well, for comparing, it's all about the conversation with the audience. It's all about, my idea as a compare was they've always got to want me to come back on again, because they know that they'll be safe and that I will make them really happy to see the next act. So it's not about me. It's about
you're not making them love you.
Yeah, no, it's about me making the room a really good place for everybody to be. So for the audience, they know, brilliant, we're going to see a good show because this guy is telling us they're good and we trust him completely. And when he says, right, bring on the next act, that act is going to be great, and we feel really safe, and we know the rules, and it's great.
This guy knows what he's doing. He says they're good.
Yeah,
this must be good. I trust him.
Yeah, and it's so they don't have to. When I come on, they don't have to kind of go, oh, is he going to be funny? Because it doesn't matter. Oh, it's that bloke. Oh, it's that bloke again. Yeah, we're just going to have a chat. He's going to be nice.
You just have to be charming.
Yeah, he'll tell us stories. Yeah.
So how do you develop rapport with people that you don't know? There's hundreds of people. They're all different from you. How do you develop rapport with them?
To not care. You've got two things. You've got to absolutely care. You've got to absolutely want everybody to have a lovely time, to have a brilliant time. Yeah. And you've got to not care about you. So it's you can. If you decide, right, an audience, I need to work this audience needs a bit of work, and I'm going to be a bit aggressive with them, then it all becomes about, right, I'm going to be boss now. I'm absolutely going to be boss, and you are going to absolutely follow what I'm doing. I'm going to put this. We're going to sort this out now.
And you have that. Do you have that within your repertoire?
Yeah.
Do you see situations where you have to do that?
Yeah. I remember once I was at the Comedy Caf, and it was near New Year. So, that Christmas New Year time when audiences can be dodgy. And I went on and I did exactly the same material I would always do, but I did it like a schoolmaster. And so instead of me kind of explaining how comedy worked and how the club worked and how we're all going to have a really good time, I basically told them how to behave. But it was all about the tone. And they all kind of went, all right, yeah, okay, cool, sorted. And it was a brilliant night, but it was really weird. I came off afterwards, and I hadn't basically the performer a little bit, trigger in my head had gone, this is what's needed, and I'd done it in that way, and because I'd done it without thinking about it and done it with such confidence, they'd gone, yeah, sorted, mate. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're not gonna be dicks. We're gonna have a great time.
I've had moments where I've called a crowd a shit crowd. You shouldn't do it. I mean, I think I'm so unschooled in performing that I don't have a lot of the things that the performers have that you shouldn't do. And I've turned around to a crowd at some point, so I've realised with just a little bit more effort, you'd have a good time. But it's not so there. And I'm going, do you know what, guys? You're a shit crowd. I've done this for like 10 years. You guys, and it's worked. And I don't do it often. I do it very rarely. And all I have to believe is that, as you said, and this is what made me think of it, there's something in the back of your head that realizes this is what you need right now. Is you need some kind of push, you need some kind of like nudge in the ribs or something to.
Yeah, no, you're right. But it's getting that. It's having the confidence to actually. Oh, so I've just kicked the table, so I'm shaking. I just realised the picture was doing that. it's having that confidence which comes either through blissful ignorance or through experience of being able to go, right, well, let's be honest with each other. When I used to do things in my street show where I'd start talking about the minimum wage to a bunch of tourists who sat there looking at me like, what the fuck are you talking about?
And so what year was this? This 1990s? So
early 90s. I would start right in the middle of a street show for no apparent reason. I would start slagging off the government.
But do you think that at least one person in your crowd heard you and it made a difference? Is that the thought at the time? Like,
I don't know. It was just a thing I was going through at the time, and it was just, I would just say what I wanted in the middle of shows, and for no apparent reason. It wouldn't help the show, and probably wouldn't help.
But do you think as an artist, do you think it's important that the show works and that's all you're aiming for, is making the show work as good as possible?
God,
or do you have a responsibility to influence in some way?
I think you have both. I mean, it's really weird, isn't it? Because there is absolutely nothing wrong with a show that starts at the beginning, goes right through, and is entertaining and lovely and has all the elements that you want, and it finishes and the audience goes away having had a lovely time. But there's that importance of them going away going, actually, that has not changed my life, but that's changed the way I think about something, or that's made me appreciate something else in a different way. That's made me think about this. And, we've all had those moments where you get somebody who comes up to you and goes, I had something awful happen in my life, and this is the first time I've laughed in months. Thank you very much. And you're like, I don't know what to say to that. That's amazing. I've done that for you, just because
it makes your day, doesn't it?
But I happen to have been the one who stood in front of you at this moment when you needed it, and it's just done it for you.
It's not just you happen to be, but you were someone who was capable at the time to do that, and that's it takes a lot of time. It takes practice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not something everyone can do, and it's not because everyone can't do it because we're special. It's because everyone can't do it because it takes fucking time to get good at doing it.
That's true. That is very true. It's very true. And it is. I have to admit, the thing I think that annoys me most in performers is when I see, and I've done it. So this is is when I see performers not trying to do anything other than what they do in their show, not wanting to put their personality into. You see performers putting their ego in. See that quite a lot. You see a lot of ego going in, but I
have no idea what you mean.
But if you like watch Alien Show is so full of her character. It's so. I watched her do a show last year at Glastonbury. Now, I've seen Alien shows several hundred times probably because we've been mates forever. And she did a show on one of these little riser stages. I think it was on the Sunday. It wasn't a big audience around her, and it was just a joy to watch because at no
did
point...
she talk about recycling and about the tetracycle, about the three?
Yeah.
We sat and watched the same show. I was there, and I was watching.
It was beautiful.
Well, do you know what was beautiful? I think about that was to watch someone who was used to do street shows walk out there and basically hold a unicycle and talk for 10 minutes in a way that's charming and interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what she did.
Yeah.
When she left the stage after someone was holding a unicycle and talked about Tetra Pak and how it's not recyclable, and her frustration through that was some of the most entertaining stuff you watch because it's real humanity.
Exactly.
And you're being comfortable in a situation that no one else is.
Yeah.
I describe street shows about being a dick. You start the show feeling a dick, and by the end of it, you feel like a god. And your career is, at least to the high point, the microcosm of that.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. When it is great, there's no. I mean, I've the years of doing stand up, and I absolutely I died on my ass, but I also stormed it as well. There was no storming in a stand up that ever matched storming in a street show. There's no, and I have had standing ovations in stand-up where they stood up to clap, whereas
they've
but it's nothing.
Why? Why do you think that? Like, can we go deeper into this?
No, I think it's due to the journey that you take an audience on in a great street show. When your street show works beautifully and the audience works beautifully with you, is so much bigger than ever. I've had. The closest I ever had was did a night of theatre in Edinburgh once, which worked in a way that I never didn't think it would. And I didn't go to bed that night. I was buzzed up for the whole night. It was just incredible. But that's the only thing that's ever come close to the feeling you get from, you walk away from.
But I'll say this again. Why? And this is I've asked a lot of people about this stuff, and I tend to find most performers try to avoid talking about the nuts and bolts of it and this kind of thing. Why do you think?
I think so. You basically started something off. With an audience, you've started your street show off, and you have clicked with that audience really, really well and really quickly. And the two of you have gone on a thing together, on a journey together, where basically they understand what you're doing the whole time, and also you don't ever stop looking after them. You never stop kind of going, right, everything I'm doing is for you.
You have to have a good time.
Yeah. And then for some reason, material of yours, which is, it's all right, suddenly becomes the funniest material that they've ever heard and that you've ever seen.
Yeah, this is the thing I keep saying is, like, I find this great struggle of watching people on camera who I love thinking, you fucking great. And then you watch your own work. And some people like me, people think I'm okay at what I do. And they watch your own work, you think, God, this is fucking shit.
Yeah.
This is awful.
I know, it is weird, isn't it? It's weird. Anyway, listen, I've just had my wife come in and tell me it's dinner time. So this has been brilliant, mate. It really has.
Paddy, it's the same. Would you like to do it again sometime?
Yeah, absolutely. Talking is...
Well, we shall. By the sounds of it, our quarantine will be going for quite some more time. So we'll have an opportunity.
And can I just say to everybody out there, don't catch corona. It's fucking horrible.
I'll just say it's very brief before we go. Paddy has had corona. We didn't mention it in the entire interview. I wasn't going to interject the interesting points we're talking about, but you've had it, no?
I've had it. I'm on day 14 or 15. As you can hear, my voice is very rough. Today is the first day I haven't slept during the day for 2 weeks. Literally.
But you're describing an unemployed lifestyle. Like,
yeah, but
is it painful? Like, does your throat hurt? Does your lungs hurt?
Weirdly, like I would say I was down with it for 3 days, maybe. So it was like a sweaty flu. And it was like a sweaty flu that you've had before, but just stronger and horrible. So like you wake up at 3 a.m. and you have to change the entire bed because there isn't a part of the bed that isn't damp and cold from your sweat, and it's disgusting and vile, and you can't sleep properly, you can't do anything, you've got no energy. And then that goes and you're like, brilliant, I'm sorted. And I put a thing on Facebook going, I've woken up now, it's great. And it was, cool. And a week later I went, shitting hell, I've lost a week. Because every day is you do one thing and you just fatigue just floods your body. So I took the dogs out for a walk the other day and I had a gentle walk, like literally a proper little stroll around the woods. And I found myself walking up the road being dragged by my dogs because I couldn't walk, I just coming in and fall asleep. So so people, stay inside, don't go out, don't do anything stupid. Look after yourselves. It's not nice. My wife had to go to hospital twice, so she's fine.
She's a doctor. She's a nurse.
She's a nurse. She's basically God, I always get her job title wrong. She's director of paediatric nursing. Basically, she's like top paediatric nurse in Chelsea and Westminster, and that is the hospital right at the centre of. So we knew she was going to bring it home at some point. We knew it was inevitable that we'd get it.
Yeah.
But my kids have survived it. They're fine. I guess.
Well, kids do better for it. It's your old buggers like you that are under concern, But it seems like you got through it. You've had quite a long, productive, I'd like to think, conversation.
Yeah.
Paddy.
Cool.
It's been a pleasure. Real pleasure to have you here.
Cool.
Thank you everyone for watching. Check in again on Friday. We have Mark Rothman. For now, Paddy, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye.